Recording in progress.
Thank you. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Hopefully we'll see Katrina. I haven't heard from her. We have our agenda, which is committee business as needed, and let's talk about that for a second. We could either do it there or under other business, so we'll probably do it here. And then the solar standards, and then, a discussion. Kim wants me to note that this was advertised in the newspaper. October 3rd. October 3rd, thank you very much. When she throws newspapers at me, I assume that's what it means. And we also have the beginning of the discussion about the use table and definitions, which is a mighty project, I think. But so I don't anticipate we're getting to all of that today. But we'll talk about how we approach that when we get to it. The committee business, after the discussion we had at the last meeting, which was sort of what is the scope of responsibility of this committee, I wrote to Rick and said, maybe I should go to the select board meeting and talk to them about it. And he agreed that that was a good idea. And so I did. And I basically came away with the direction to go back and write a statement of purpose for the Land Use Advisory Committee. So Tim is circulating a 15-minute draft that I wrote on my own after that meeting. And that's all it is. And it is no more. And it should be simply seen as a conversation starter. And what I started with was simply my perception of what the committee is, maybe putting a little structure around it and what and how it should function. So it's just the one page. And the Land Use Advisory Committee is a non-decision-making committee created by the Select Board for the purposes of providing citizen input and advice on ordinances pertaining to land use matters in the town. The work of the committee includes generating proposals for new ordinances and amendments to existing ordinances. The work of the committee will be in coordination with and responsive to the priorities of the Select Board and Planning Board. The committee may receive requests for proposed ordinances from the public, but should seek input from the Select Board and or Planning Board before proceeding with action on such requests. The committee's work will be guided by the principles articulated in the comprehensive plan. It will strive for simplification and clarity, that is user friendliness in the land use ordinances. The committee will annually and on an ongoing basis attempt to prioritize its work to best reflect the greatest needs as articulated by the Select Board and Planning Board. The committee will provide opportunity for resident feedback on its work. The committee will make recommendations to the Select Board and Planning Board about proposals for land use ordinance changes to be considered and disposed of at town meeting, and will facilitate the Planning Board's public hearings on the matters. It may adopt its own procedures, and it encourages residents to apply to the Select Board to serve on the committee. Terms will be for 3 years. Since then, and I discussed it at the planning board. Since then, come on down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can move over too. I can move down. Or so take the corner, there you go.
Since then, I've already had one, possibly two people say to me that they think this ought to be broader and it ought to be an ordinance review committee, period, not just land use. So I envision this as a thing that's gonna keep back and forth for a while between this committee, between the select board and between the planning board and between anyone else who wants to get involved in the discussion. So, I will stop, and maybe some of the people who thought we should have a broader portfolio will say so, but, because the real issue, as I heard it, was there's no place else for that work to be done. So.
Well, I mean, obviously, this isn't just a land use advisory group committee, because we're not doing just land use. So
Well, we're not just you doing the LUZO, but then there's a discussion about what does land use mean? Is land use simply the LUZO, or does it also things that are come before the planning board, like the subdivision ordinance and so forth? So it could be stuff that comes before the planning board, or it is, which is within the planning board, or it could be broadened to be clear that it
There used to be
or it
an
could
ordinance
even-
review committee a while ago. And I'm not sure if that was the one that was created to do the comp plan. I think that's the name of it. That was the name of their committee. You remember that?
It
No?
may have been.
But historically, we have said that with like the quarrying ordinance, that it, since it was going to be a freestanding all by itself ordinance, that required a subcommittee to be looking specifically at that while we continued our work. We also did exactly the same thing when we started to dig into the short-term rentals proposed ordinance, and were informed that we may have been dragging our feet, even though we had a full agenda and other things to work on, and subsequently created a subcommittee to work on that. So maybe this body is where the birth of subcommittees comes from, or issues that pertain to other ordinances that are outside the land use zoning ordinance. I'm just throwing that out as a suggestion. We may end up being a collective basket or catch-all for all manner of proposed ordinances that don't specifically apply to land use issues that need to require some guidance in the creation of the subcommittee. But I just throw that out there as an alternative. We've kind of done it ad hoc in the past, and it has worked. So anyway,
Right, we should
My
have,
2
we
cents worth.
should have as much clarity as possible about what this committee does, what it doesn't do. And then anticipate what other things are gonna need doing and who's gonna do those, just sort of try to solve that problem that we know is gonna keep occurring. And if it's this committee, then that's fine, I guess. But we should figure that out. And make recommendations and have that conversation with the select. Because it's ultimately their decision to make, it seems to me, how they want to articulate it. What are the thoughts you have about this? And this is not, this is just being thrown at you, most people here, so this will come up again. But, Katrina, were you at that meeting? You were at that meeting, select board meeting? What did you think?
I thought we were a committee, not a board.
Yeah.
Which meant that we didn't have to have meetings or a president or any like parliamentary procedure pieces. We were reviewing, we were making suggestions, we had no jurisdiction really.
Right.
But we were more of a sounding board as a larger representation of the community.
That would be the first sentence, the first
There
line,
you go.
a non-decision making committee.
I'm pretty good at non-decision making some days.
Who else?
Well, I mean, what, we have a member of the select board, I mean, what? I guess, how do you look at it from a selectman point of view?
Oh, well,
guess?
I think I went into it briefly at our last
Mhm.
advisory committee meeting and ad nauseum at the select board meeting as to when we gave birth to this committee back in,
Oh my God, when the crisis
God,
was
2007 or 2008, I believe. Because at that time, the land use zoning ordinance as a freestanding document had become too thick.
Right,
And there were sections in there that either no longer applied, were contradictory. Or every time our CEO made a decision, there was a window of opportunity for appeal. Because somewhere else in the LUZO, it said something that was contrary to the decision that our CEO had just made.
okay, yeah.
And that's what struck me as, we need to get together a bunch of people and look at this
Figure it out.
document. And figure
And
out
can't
why this is happening
Yeah,
and do what we need to do to prevent it from happening in the future.
right, yeah, okay, yeah.
So that's where it began back in 07, 08, I guess it was. And it was going along very, very well to the point where everyone on the committee saw possibilities for us to look at sections for repeal and replacement, to look at new things that were going on in our community that heretofore had never happened. So if that's going to be happening, we need to have some means of regulating that, and to begin suggesting ordinance creation. And it's just evolved, I guess, over time to where we are today.
Okay. I mean,
I don't have a problem with where we are today, it's just that it's getting somewhat convoluted in terms of what our purpose is, what our goal is.
Yeah.
And whether we are to become a body that makes recommendations to the planning board and the select board for changes to the LUZO and or creation of new ordinances.
Right.
That was the piece that began to feel a little bit unwieldy to me, was the creation of new ordinances based on citizenry approaching this board with an application or written or whatever. Can't we have an ordinance that does this? And
yeah,
all of a sudden it got thrown into our queue as to, well, let's take a look at that. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm not sure. Isn't there a process for that?
yeah,
So our work started to get somewhat muddled. And projects began jumping one ahead of the other
yeah.
because of perceived importance. And here we are today trying to organize, bring some clarity to what our function is and.
Well, and some for Kim's clarity, because I mean, you're getting bogged down too in some of this.
Getting?
I'm sorry, you are very bogged down in some of this, right? Okay.
So that's the selectman's perspective. I can't, like I say, speak for the entire select board, but.
You're the one here, so it's,
They asked me to be their liaison to this board, so committee, so here I am.
So, go ahead.
I really like your fourth paragraph where it says we may receive requests from the public, but will not act until the select board or planning board tells us what to do.
Right,
I think that's really important.
because we're an advisory
Yeah,
committee,
I
and
think
we're
that's
not
critical.
we're not a generating committee.
Right,
You know, we may ourselves, in consultation with, see something that's an issue and discuss it with them, and the planning board or may say, yeah, that is a problem, or yeah, that would be good, and then we can proceed, but that we're not creating work for ourselves.
Right.
Spontaneously. So with respect to the purpose of the original assignment for the Land Use Advisory Committee, it seems to me is important. But the question is, how is it best fit for purpose going forward? And I think that's what we're trying to figure out here. And I guess what we could do is, we can leave it at this point. I can continue to try to reflect and ask questions, like ask the select board, well, what about these other ordinances? Who's gonna handle these other ordinances? Who's gonna handle, like Kim brought up the idea of, the septic tank business,
I
like,
always want to read it.
yeah, so right now, Kim has the rural wastewater, she has to do all the inspections. And that's extremely onerous. And should there be an ordinance correction that puts that in someone else's court? Well, that's not really a land use issue. But so who would handle dealing with that sort of
That'd be
thing?
your system.
Do you have a deputy CEO now?
no, I
She's
don't
got
think she does,
nada.
just nobody. God, I can't.
I have an application though,
Oh, okay,
Oh.
okay,
but I have to talk to
Yeah.
the person first.
yeah. And this is
Because
what
some
the
of those
first
duties were
application,
to
2-3 years? Because haven't you been?
Yeah.
looking for
fall
someone
to
for-
the
I've had
deputy.
a part-time
CEO.
one, but it went full-time at town meeting.
Oh, okay, okay.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
So initially, part of that deputy CEO or assistant CEO, whatever the title would be, was to take some of that burden away from you and move like those inspections for the rural wastewater support program to that person. Clear your schedule, because you can only schedule so many minutes into so many days, and
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, I mean, it was a kind of a waste of my time.
exactly.
You know, I mean, I was, a lot of inspections, I had 104 this year and, it's a just needless, quick stupid, kind of, not stupid, but inspections that are just needless, and I could be doing something else.
But it takes your time to
Take your
drive
time,
there,
yeah.
to drive back.
It's probably half a day once you
Do
get
the
there.
paperwork.
Yeah, especially
So
when I
there it
did
is.
quite a few in a
So
row.
the question for us will be, is that the kind of thing that we want to suggest or ask, who's gonna do it if we don't? Who's gonna help?
Yeah.
Do that if we don't?
That type of a decision, I don't believe belongs with this committee whatsoever.
Right,
That falls squarely on the shoulders of the select board.
to generate the need to alter the ordinance.
To look at what the need is within this community for rural wastewater support program inspections.
Right,
And to do whatever it needs to do to authorize the amelioration of that issue. Whether it's hiring a deputy, whether it's
We have-
contracting it out or whatever, but it doesn't belong here.
it sounds like that's on to an agenda meeting soon.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, good.
But it doesn't belong here.
Yeah,
But it's
Right.
the same with the sale of food and merchandise ordinance. I don't think it belongs here.
right. No, I wouldn't entertain that.
I mean, because that is discussing about doing something on public property.
Yeah, sidewalks.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, that's why, yeah. That request that was done this past summer, if you recall.
And
Okay,
again, last meeting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it was brought up, yeah, because she had asked, how does she? Oh,
Yeah.
she feel it? Yep.
okay, so let's leave that for now. And if I draft anything else in response to these discussions, I will share it with everybody. And ship it to the town office and see at what point they want to reconvene and when we're ready to talk about a draft that and I will continue to bring it to the planning board. I'm sure the planning board is on board with that. I did
Cool.
just discuss it with them the last meeting, kind of last minute, kind of anything. It's always other on the agenda. It's like,
Yeah.
there is one foot out the door. Anyway, let's get to the solar standards. And we have been given a new provision with lots of questions in it, with good questions in it. And maybe we have our own. And so there was an email from, and I think there are copies of it. If you don't, there are copies that Kim made, if you don't have it with you. This is suggested language for Climate to Thrive and model language developed by Maine Audubon. And it's been drafted as if it's gonna be a new section in the land use ordinance rather than a separate ordinance. And one of the questions is, where do the definitions belong?
Would you mind if I
Yes, no,
do a little bit of an overview?
Thank you.
thank you.
So the first thing is, the language here is pretty standard stuff for solar standards in a lot of different places, and we did get a good draft from a Climate to Thrive before we even started this.
Mhm.
And they used a bunch of standards from a template that Maine Audubon created, which basically has some provisions that if you have a site plan review ordinance, which we do not have, or like regular standards in a separate ordinance, that's what Maine Audubon, it's like a guidance document. So the way that I approached this one was, if you want to adopt solar standards, the most appropriate place for it would be in the land use ordinance. So this would be a separate section under 6B to integrate into the land use ordinance that deals with the three different types of solar energy systems. That's what the terminology is.
Because they are structures that
They are
pretty much basically, yeah.
Yeah. And so the first question wasn't where the definitions belong, because the definitions belong in section 7. But it
Okay.
is, in order to understand what we're talking about for this whole ordinance, you need to understand
Yes,
what solar energy systems are. So the first thing you should be looking at is the definition section, which is at the back.
Okay.
So that you understand that there's small scale solar energy systems, there's medium scale solar energy systems, and there's large scale solar energy systems. And really the difference between medium scale and large scale is how much area it encompasses, I guess, same with small scale. And so the first question is, does that make sense to everybody? And we can get back to this, but I'll just give you the quick 101. And then the next question is, okay, now that we understand what we're talking about. Where in town should those things be allowed? And that's the first part of that section 3.4. And integrated into that conversation is, should large-scale solar energy systems even be allowed anywhere in town? So the draft that you have, I just put X's all the way across the board. That doesn't mean that's the way it needs to be, but that's just the way I did it.
No, when you say in town, do you mean Northeast Harbor or all of Mount Desert?
The whole town.
The whole town of Mount Desert, okay.
You know, and so that's really kind of a question about, you know, what scale is appropriate for this community and what isn't, you know? And so then, once we get into that, once we deal with that question, then we can get into, okay, do these standards that we've laid out start to make sense? So in the ordinance, we have, you know, the small scale systems are actually allowed, everywhere. And you could either decide to have them allowed everywhere by right, which means you don't need to get a permit for it, or you could decide to have them require a building permit, or you could decide to have small scale systems differentiate between those that are on a roof, and those that are on the ground. So there's like a bunch of layers that we just kind of. Question, I think I tried to lay out was, number one, do this 3 solar energy systems make sense to everybody? And where should we allow them all in town? And then we can go into like where.
Question,
Yes,
when you refer to small scale as opposed to large scale?
Yep.
Large scale, are you referring to a commercial development?
well, that actually was a question that I have that I haven't really resolved in my own mind yet, but I think that would be a commercial scale.
I
Solar
would, that's what
energy
would come to
system.
mind.
Yep.
I mean,
That's
More
what
than
comes to
2
mind with me,
acres.
but
Like
I
a
do have to do a
field
little
or-
research on that. Yeah.
Well,
so-
whatever the standard might be.
Yeah, well, his definition here is more than 2 acres.
I think those are
The,
commercial scale
Yeah.
solar energy systems.
Correct.
Yep.
I also thought, frankly, I was surprised the 1/3 acre is a small scale.
Yep,
That seems like a large, small scale to me.
yeah, and we can definitely change the numbers, I'm just using like kind of standard
Yeah.
approach here. So,
That seems like a big chunk of real estate to be called a small scale.
Yep,
And then, and my inclination is, it makes no sense to talk about large scale solar energy systems in the town of Missouri. I just, where?
Yeah,
I would agree
I mean,
with that.
I mean, I do
Five
think there's a
acres, that's
difference
3 to
between
5
rooftop and ground. I think we need to be mindful of the distinction of the issues there. So
Yep.
I think there is a distinction there personally. Only speaking for myself here.
I agree.
And I think that large scale, 2 acres of solar panels isn't gonna happen in the town of Mount Desert. If at some point in the future, somebody thinks that's important to do, they can amend this ordinance. You know, they can. But it's hard to imagine it being a useful. We want the ordinances to be useful, and I can't imagine that being useful.
Oh, there's a lot of properties.
I was
that
gonna
have big
say, there's a
acreage.
lot of,
you know,
I don't, but I don't, yeah,
I crossed it out, but you
Yeah,
guys,
I
I
don't-
didn't want to make that, I can't make that decision.
I guess it,
Well, I think we should take our first best shot at creating if we're creating an ordinance that works for everybody. And not necessarily creating an ordinance with an eye toward it can be amended at a later date. Why create a product that would anticipate amendment? Any ordinance can be applied. for
You're
it
not
to
so
be
much
amended.
anticipating
Not about
amendment,
the
but
solar field, no one's really come to yet, so it's
The
not a
town- the
burning.
town's doing it.
The
I was
town,
gonna
yeah.
say, so is that commercial?
Oh, yeah, so it's the town one, good question.
Is the town solar field considered a commercial?
Where's
Absolutely.
that one
Yeah.
going?
I think it would be probably more like a medium scale.
Still
On
a great,
public property,
On a creek, so
On a
harbor.
oh, wow,
anything on public property would be a commercial development.
and how big are those ones going in, are they not sure yet?
That'll be there.
No one knows yet, or,
So I would say
We
like,
discussed.
okay, yeah,
don't get hung up necessarily on like, is it commercial or not commercial? It's really like for the land use
Yes,
ordinance.
yes.
It's much more about what
just,
is the impact to the land
Hmm.
for this particular use, and is it appropriate for certain areas in town?
Mm-hmm.
And what information do you need in order to make good decisions about this particular use?
right,
So I don't think you should get hung up on whether or not like the town's thing is commercial, or is it
Right.
public, or is it private?
Mhm.
It really doesn't matter. It is, if it's a certain size,
yeah,
Stab.
then it belongs here, and these are the things that we'd like you to do, and if it isn't, then it doesn't belong here, and we don't want, it's like kind of that, it's almost that simple.
I guess that's, I
It took me a
mean,
lot. There's a lot to it,
I was just gonna, I mean, I don't.
but I think it's more about like why communities are not allowing industrial scale solar farms is because they don't wanna take that much land out of
Right.
their, it's the impact of that huge type of development, plus the
Yeah.
utilities that have to get there in order for it to be a
Yes, okay.
functional space. Is that-
Right, because isn't Trenton sort of fighting that right now? Is it Trenton or
Yes,
something?
I
Yeah,
heard some headlines, I don't know
Something,
exactly, but
yeah.
I'm sure that's part of it.
Part
you
of
know.
it.
And so what other communities are facing all around is, you get, what is it, driving to Bangor?
Oh,
all of a
yeah.
sudden,
I know.
Things
Yeah.
pops up and you're like, wow, there's one right there.
And the
Oh,
highways.
that one.
Have you seen the one in one
How much of the,
Yeah.
how much of the energy generated in those
Hmm.
large fields in a community is dedicated to that community?
I don't know.
No, they're companies. I think they're
I think they're
companies.
That's a
companies,
that are-
yeah.
question that I would like to have
Yeah.
answered
Yeah.
before I
Yeah.
said, oh my God, yeah, let's give up 20 acres of town land or whatever
To
to
go
put one of
somewhere
these things
else.
up. If
Yeah.
the town's not gonna be getting anything
Yeah.
back.
And so I did say, like, to a climate to thrive, like, cause they have pretty good understanding of like what's happening around for it, but I think what we ought to do is. Let's think about what you think is appropriate for this community, and then I already told them, like, once I get a kind of some notes on this one and maybe a tweaked draft, that I would like to kind of review with them and see if there's anything that really gives them heartburn or jumps out at them. Not heartburn, like, is there anything that jumps out at you as something that we're missing and we're not considering? My sense was that large scale solar energy systems wouldn't really fit in, even in the rural area, just because of the back of the. I don't know, I don't even know if it's value of land, but it isn't
Mhm.
really the aesthetic that you're going for.
Mhm.
But
Right.
I don't even know how to describe it, it just seems
Yes.
big.
I have another
Yeah.
question. As we consider developing an ordinance, are we looking at creating a mechanism by which a residential structure can have solar panels,
Yes,
and
Yes.
that solar energy will be used by that residential property?
yes, I think
So
so,
it's for individual use.
yeah, it could be for individual use, yes,
Gotcha.
it could also be whatever, I don't mean that's.
So you're basically asking battery backup or.
Well,
feed into the grid.
whatever, but we're not gonna create something that says that you can put this on your land, but half of it has to go to the grid.
I don't think
Oh,
that's.
no, I don't think that's a factor in this ordinance.
If I put up a 1 acre area on my property, it's gonna be for servicing my home, my,
If you want
family.
If you
If
want.
that's-
Right, right.
Otherwise.
That's what I mean. I just wanted to clarify that the reason, the motivation behind wanting to do this on your property has to be substantial, I would think.
Yeah, I would think, but I think the reason for doing this ordinance is because we know as a community and of just observing what's happening in the energy industry and with climate change and resiliency planning and all the good things that everybody's doing, like this particular use is something that needs to get addressed in the land use perspective. So
Right.
it's things like, let's do, if I wanna put solar panels on my roof, do I need to get a permit for that?
Right,
Do I need to count that toward height restrictions? If I don't wanna put it on my roof because it doesn't, the orientation isn't right, but I wanna do the same thing and put it on the ground, what are the setbacks? It's the same,
Yeah.
we
Yep.
treat,
I
gotcha.
require permits for them,
Mhm.
they have to meet setbacks, they're not exempt under the definition.
Well, it's a structure.
they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I question whether it goes to, if it interferes with height, especially in the shoreline zone.
Yeah.
But if it's flat, it doesn't have floor area, according to MMA, it's not, it won't affect the height.
Right.
But for a while there, I was requiring permits because they are elevated.
Mhm.
Did we have a
They don't-
discussion once too about, say my neighbor has solar, I can't then put a structure up and block the view of their solar, did we have, is that, am I actually remembering that
That
correctly?
is
or not?
actually something in the subdivision ordinance where you're supposed to address, and I think we did try to change that, but. We will have that discussion again in the subdivision ordinance, because technically, when you're doing like, you're supposed to consider, how you're citing buildings so that it doesn't obstruct
Doesn't
And
create
so I'm
shade.
losing buildable land potentially because of that. Say my neighbor builds solar next to me,
Mhm.
then my setbacks potentially increase.
You know, I think that would that would probably be more something that you do, like a traditional subdivision, like if I'm coming in, I'm gonna say, hey, for here, we're gonna think about solar, so we might increase the setback in our own subdivision, but it doesn't necessarily affect the municipal setbacks.
Well, if
Like,
there
there's
is,
no rule.
if there is no rule that says you can't block
Right,
a neighbor's panel, it's up to them to think about that possibility when they're citing
Right,
their own system, and as long as you're complying with the setbacks.
Right.
You're complying with the setbacks,
yeah.
but is that how that's
Nothing
read?
in here would change that.
Right,
that's.
but is that how it's written? Am I still misunderstanding? If there's existing solar next to me and I wanna say build a garage,
Nope.
I can't block their solar.
I don't think that's how. it's
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, so is it the chicken or the, I mean, who, if there's already panels there, he could not build a garage.
He could build a
He
garage.
I mean, he could, so he could, and then
yes.
they duke it out in court or whatever happens,
That's
but
right, it
okay.
becomes a civil matter at that point.
Right,
Yeah, I was
okay,
gonna say,
okay.
but he can still build
Yeah,
I don't
whatever he
even know, yeah, what's
wants,
the-
or whoever
Your
can. Okay.
setbacks are here.
Interesting.
This is a structure, this is how we're treating it.
Oh, my goodness.
That would be a
If Joe wants to put a
disaster.
garage right
Like
on
people
the
hold their
setback.
signs on.
Yeah. That would be an
Okay.
interesting, yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're back to the question of how we feel about the scale, the large scale. And your impression is that there is actually the potential for land in the town of Mount Desert that might accommodate more than 2 acres?
Yes.
And that people might be willing to do
I
that?
mean.
You
You can't predict the future with what people are gonna do
Yeah.
with their property.
Okay,
True, there is a lot of lots of, or properties that have substantial amount of acreage,
okay,
specifically in the rural woodlands too, and
I was gonna say, there's gotta be.
mainly.
so for the sake of discussion, we can leave number 3 in there and then see where we go with it in terms of districts. Where it might be permitted and see if we can make that seem like it will work.
But does anybody have an idea of how much you need of solar to like panels to like run your house?
I think it depends on the draw that you wanna
I
get.
mean, I've
Yeah.
like I issued one not too long ago, what was it, 65, I think it was, and it was for a house.
Right,
But
yeah,
then-
65
round-
panels.
Yep, ground mounted, but it's a house.
right,
Yeah,
So. we
depends if
have-
it's all electric, like I have heat pumps and I have,
yeah.
Well, maybe they'll have.
everything's
no-
electric.
It's on the water.
Yeah,
I think
it's on
the
the
draw.
water.
So
Are
with
they
that
on the roof?
said, yeah,
No,
I feel like we need
no.
education on this.
65.
Would it, would be, if any benefit for climate thrive, climate thrive to come speak to us?
Yes,
Cause I'm pretty ignorant on
Absolutely.
solar energy and its requirements and all that.
Yeah, come to Board of Selectmen explain, but yeah,
Yeah, I can do that.
I'm sure they'd be happy to come and talk.
Have someone,
I mean, do we think that's worthwhile?
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, seeing, yeah, I don't know
Sure.
much about,
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen them on some people's roofs here and there, but I don't.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm taking a fairly simple view of this whole thing.
Yeah.
They are structures and they are in use, like how many you have or what draw you have really has no bearing. on
And does it matter what
discussion.
size they are? Do they come in all different
Yeah.
sure,
sizes?
it's not just the number of panels,
Yeah.
you
they
decide.
come
You
in different
decide.
purposes. I mean, we
Yeah.
have, so we have solar panels at our house
Yeah,
and they heat the hot water. They don't-
okay,
They don't,
Yeah.
when I thought we were having a conversation at my house about solar panels,
yeah.
I thought we were having a conversation about producing electricity for our
Oh,
house.
okay, but
But
to
it was
find
not
out,
That was
okay,
not the way it turned out.
okay,
We
okay.
produce hot water.
Right,
Which is, still, I mean, yeah, but okay,
but it's all about how much draw
how much job, yeah.
for the things that you want to power with solar.
So how many panels do you have? Oh, and are they
Well,
roofed
that's
or ground?
different
No,
because
ours
it's,
are ground panels
Ground panels,
and
okay.
we actually
Yeah.
used ours as a privacy fence.
Oh, okay, well, hey,
I mean,
whatever.
I know
Yeah.
two for a cape. That I
Okay.
issued a permit for.
But is it their whole, are you, do you not, it was it their whole?
It's their house.
It's their whole house?
Yep, they have nothing else, no other structures, just the house, but the one
Okay.
that I issued on the shore, it's a good sized house on the
Yeah.
water.
Okay, but they
That had a-
needed 65
Yeah.
or they wanted.
Yeah,
well, what
that
happens
one.
is you have an engineer,
Yeah.
calculates
Yes,
what
yeah,
it's gonna be, and they also are gonna calculate, they calculate your site, and
Yeah.
they figure out the. You know, the arc of the sun, and they figure out how much where and when it's feasible to actually do it, and they design a system for you, and then you talk about. How much you can get out of it versus how much you wanna pay versus,
But it does vary, because I got roof two
Right.
at 36 for a house, which is a ranch.
right,
So it like,
Yeah, again,
Right.
we, just as a process, and we talked about it, and you really just go and talk to like Sundog Solar, and they'll come over and say,
yes,
this is the demand of your.
I mean,
Mhm.
they've plugged your numbers into programs.
so, but 2 acres or more is considered commercial, at least the standard, is that
In
what?
this area, in this ordinance,
In
yes,
this, yeah.
in the model, I would say, and that's a lot, I mean.
That's a lot,
you're
that's,
Yeah.
clearing
that's
2
80,
acres of land.
yeah, 87,000
How many-
square feet.
do we have a way of comparing that to the high school and the number of panels they have?
I probably could figure that out.
Yeah,
I just can't help but think we keep having this conversation ever since I've been part of this group, of the fact that we have a housing issue and the lack of enough land.
Mhm.
And then the other part for me is we are in Acadia National Park. And just for a personal preference or thought is large scale solar farm does not fit in this community.
Mhm.
It goes against
Mhm.
the aesthetic and it goes against our need for housing,
Mhm.
personally. Not to say there could be a way to make that work, but just initially without much education just yet.
You're talking ground mounted.
ground, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it could be other things, like covering parking lots or things, something like that, that might work really well. I don't know, but
right,
taking away from, say, residential areas where housing could be had is not in my interest.
right, right.
Is there a way
Then
to
again,
say
powering those
also, like, if there
properties in a
was
way
a
that's not-
commercial one
Carbon.
done, that the
Right,
power can't go to New Jersey, like it has to stay, no, it's all up to the person that puts it in.
Well, it's the
It
system,
goes to
Or
the,
the
into the grid.
system,
It
it
feeds
goes into the grid,
electric
right, but you can't say this needs to stay, this power needs to stay in the town
No,
of Mount Desert.
no. That's kind of like the workforce needs to work in Northeast. Ohio.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So, there is a difference, as we mentioned earlier, between roof mounted and ground mounted. Roof mounted is really unobtrusive. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah,
don't
that
notice
is-
that I have solar panels, because I have a gray metal roof, but a lot of people don't notice that I have solar panels. Because they're just, and they're there. And they're low profile. I mean, I suppose you've got to worry about the roof ones that, if people have a flat roof and they tip them, then that's a different story, but. It should be a lot easier to get a permit to put panels on a roof than it should be to put an array in your yard or in your field, it seems to me.
I agree.
I mean. But in most applications, you can't get that much electricity generated off your roof. That's one of the challenges. It'd be nice if we encourage people to, when they oriented their house, when they're building, to think about that, but.
it seems to me, that the majority of the things that you're gonna be dealing with, either on the roof or. On the ground are gonna be small
Yeah,
scale.
Yeah.
To maybe medium scale, but the large scale ones aren't designed to just power your house, like
Right.
that's a whole other thing that you're.
right,
Right,
it's next amp or somebody who wants
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
sell power to
That's the reason.
power shares to,
Yeah, in this draft, we kind of approach the smaller ones, it's like, yep, I get it, let's just do the roof thing, that's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward, again, you could separate the two, you could.
it seems like
The
that's
original
what's
draft was
appropriate for our
separated,
LUZO,
But I thought it was confusing.
Mhm.
is the residential for our LUZO.
Yeah.
And not looking at large scale commercial development.
Right, well, it is,
I don't think that's what our LUZO
it is,
intended to do.
but that's what you do.
well, we have a whole bunch of commercial activities that are all covered by the LUZO.
Realize that.
You know,
We
gravel
separate
pits.
this one out?
which
Well,
we
so what
can't have.
happens to the ones that are possibly going in Still Harbor and Otter Creek? Do we just stay out of that?
Which ones are those?
Well, I put that are being discussed or,
It's town ones.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
those
we just-
hopefully would fit within one of these categories that we've already talked about, since the
Okay.
people that are working with the town.
Yeah.
To do those, have like weighed in on this draft.
So if we have, I notice in section 4, I don't need to jump around, you can stop me by that small scale solar energy systems are permitted without a permit in all districts. unless they are determined by the CEO to present any unreasonable safety risks. So how does it? Obviously, the one thing about roof panels is you do need to make sure that the roof, the weight can be handled, accommodated by the roof, and you've got to have the right electrical connections and all that stuff. So if it's gonna be done without a permit, how does that happen? You've got to have some sort of oversight by the CEO that they're meeting electric codes and,
Well, you don't need electrical permits for residential in the town of Mount Desert.
so who oversees that to make sure
That
that,
should be the property owner, I guess.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
the
I mean, I
property
think
owner.
there are situations in town where things are allowed that we're relying on either the builder or the installer or the property owner to be responsible for set of
okay.
rules that we don't always go out and inspect. I mean, like building codes,
Mm-hmm.
electrical codes.
Yeah.
I mean, the contractors still meet building code requirements even though they're not being inspected every day by Kim.
Right, well, it was just confusing because the language is the permit without permit unless they're determined by the CEO with input from the fire chief to present any unreasonable safety risk, including but not limited to, blah, blah, blah. So I presume there was some process by which she would be,
Kind of like a notice of intent that I'm planning on putting solar panels on my roof, Kim. I know I don't need a permit, but you've been provided notice, you and the chief can come look if you want.
I'm not sure
Yeah, in
that's
the, in the
And then if-
ordinance, it says.
If it's determined by you and the chief, that,
right,
Which means they don't need a permit.
right,
I just change it because we don't typically use the terminology, by right in this town. but
right.
It's the same thing. If you see P on the allowed use table, that's by right. Like, I don't need to talk to anybody, I'm just gonna do it. But then there could be situations where like fire chief or the code enforcement officer are driving by me, like, I don't know if that, ratchet.
Yeah.
Should
Have
have.
12
Right.
panels on it, yeah.
Right.
Huh.
The application review process is pretty demanding in terms of in
Yep.
terms of the detail it expects to provide. It looks like you've got that designed, so it's just the medium and large scale.
Correct.
So we're just simply not gonna have those sorts of requirements for small scale. And that's a third of an acre, so it would be good to know, like, how many panels we would anticipate would be in a third of an acre.
Yeah.
What size array are we actually talking about?
Right, so the thought process there was, I don't even know this, I mean, these is in the weeds, maybe for you guys, but like number 3 could be at the end of this section, or it could be at the beginning, I don't know where it really belongs, we have to kind of figure that out.
Yeah,
The reality is in the way that this is set up, medium scale, so, and again, we totally could ask for a building permit for small scale.
Mhm.
There may be a reason to do that, which I guess we still need to check with Kyle about, right?
Well, I know Kyle wants to know about solar, installations, because I don't know if they get a break on their taxes with it, or.
Right, what I'm trying to do, so first cut, let's make it not another burden on the code enforcement office. Solar panels are allowed, you could break it out by, you have to get a building permit for ground mounted.
Yeah.
You don't need one for a roof mounted, whatever, however we wanna do. it.
right,
That to me is the easy, we can make that. So the next cut is, the bigger ones need to go to planning board for conditional use. So the question is, what additional information should that applicant specify in any sort of conditional use for in the ordinance? And we all know from experience that there's really not a lot that's required, there's no specifications in the conditional use to say you must provide this or that. So that's the reason why that's here.
okay.
If
So,
I'm an applicant, I'd wanna know, like, okay, I do need to do a precondition, an existing conditions plan and a proposed development plan, things that you normally expect in a plan board process when you get like professionals coming in before you, but
Right.
it doesn't always happen.
but I do agree that the ground mount, small scale, seems to me it would be appropriate to require, it's a structure.
Yeah.
So it seems to me it would be appropriate to require, it's a separate structure, it would require a permit for that.
Yep.
But I don't think it should necessarily be something that requires the extensive mapping. I mean, it's like, I have 1.3 acres, I have this is the setback, this is where I'm gonna locate it. This is gonna be the height. This is how it's gonna connect, it's not gonna have power poles, it's gonna go underground. What else would you, so-and-so's gonna do the, I don't know if you get into who's gonna do the work, but.
Yeah, I would still, I mean, again, the way the setup was, those ones are supposed to be super easy and the other ones.
Yes. Yes,
Well,
Okay.
shoreline might have more restrictions, because you can't clear cut
Right.
to install
right,
ground mounted solar panels.
right,
I mean, if you're gonna require a ground mounted, small scale ground mounted solar energy system to have a building permit, then we may wanna just say, here are the basic things that he's gonna wanna, the CEO is gonna wanna look at
Mhm.
in order to make him,
That's
just,
what I do now.
right,
you know.
right.
Yeah, I mean.
I
you
treat
may-
it just
you
like
may
a regular structure.
Chances are you're not asking anyway, but we
I
may
do.
want to put it in the ordinance and so.
Right,
So
okay,
the home that just did however many, did you look at that as 65 separate structures?
no.
with the-
It's
Or
on a
how
clump,
many?
it's on a clump, they're together like a
Okay, but
rectangle.
say if someone
So
had
they all,
one
they
here,
all have
here,
different setbacks.
okay, but you looked at that as one
I did.
structure in
I
that
did.
one. But if they had, say, 5 here and 5 here.
Well, they're all connected
So, okay, with one,
anyways.
okay, so it's
Electrically,
considered
they're
a
all
one
connected.
structure.
Yeah, because they were
Okay.
all interconnected.
But if they were separate.
If they were separate, yes, I look at them
Separate
differently.
Right, if they were separate,
structures.
they'd be
Yeah.
two, if they one on each side of the house or whatever.
And then, there's some stuff further in there, like what do you want to count for impervious coverage?
Shadow,
Okay,
it's no different than eaves on a
sure.
house.
Yeah, I think the way that this is
Yeah.
written is if it's grass, it doesn't, it's just where it connects to the ground and grass underneath doesn't count towards your impervious coverage. But if it is paved or otherwise gravel, that would be impervious.
right.
But again, those are questions that we need to ask.
That, regarding that and the land clearing and soil erosion, there's a section in here that says no prime agricultural soil or significant volume of topsoil should be removed, and I just went looking for a definition of that. And I couldn't find one.
Which one is that?
On page 4. Standards for medium scale solar energy systems. No prime agricultural soil or significant volume of topsoil. I didn't see a definition of prime agricultural soil, and I'm wondering how that gets.
Yeah, we could probably actually remove, I don't know if there is any, but we'd have to. There's a map we can look at. to figure that out.
Okay.
You got the soil survey too.
Yeah, it's pretty much that.
Yeah.
Okay. The removal of no longer functional units, I'm greatly in favor of requiring people to be responsible for removing obsolete structures like that. I wonder why we wouldn't also require that if you've got somebody who's got as much of a third of an acre of ground mounted solar panels that are no longer operational, why you wouldn't create the same expectation there. To remove them if, and the definition is if they haven't been used within a year, I think. And they're not, they've basically been abandoned for use. Why we wouldn't require their removals. They're not pretty things.
Yeah.
They're functional and it's like looking at my heat pumps every time I walk into my house. It's like, I appreciate the job they do and I'm not ashamed of them, but they're not an architectural digest.
We could, so what you're suggesting is just to kind of build from the beginning, let's. I think we're scoping out small scale a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between, we're all agreeing that there's a difference between roof mounted, this is just for small scale. For
Yep,
There's a difference between roof mounted and ground mounted.
right.
Will both require a permit? Or only one?
Only the ground, I would think.
Do we think elevation's a problem? Cause.
Well, well, since I got the MMA interpretation, I haven't required roof mounted ones. I've omitted inland ones anyways, I haven't counted inland ones. I just did the shoreline zone until I got that determination, and now I don't even require.
I mean, I don't know if you need to make a distinction between roof mounted ones that are flush to the roof, we're talking, 4 inches or something off the surface of the solar panels. I've measured exactly, but they're very, very low profile.
Well, some lay flat, some are, raised just a little
Right, that's
bit
what I'm
to
saying,
get
if
that.
they are.
I mean, we're not, so in the definition, yeah, you would exempt those roof mounted structures from height calculations, so it's just like a chimney or an antenna.
Right,
It's got no floor area, I mean, you can step on them, but,
I wouldn't,
well, no, I'm just saying, but they're not considered floor area.
yeah,
And in Mount Reserve, I'm always cautious, I wanna say, let's just keep it simple, but then all of a sudden, simple becomes like
Don't,
the
yeah.
worst thing ever.
Yeah.
So, I think Kim and I are talking about it next year, saying like, why didn't we
Why
do
didn't,
this?
yeah.
Because we were trying to keep it simple.
right,
Anyway, so we've got, no permitting for roof, building permit, so it's a building permit or ground mounted. There's a difference between the information you provide in a building permit and the information you provide in a CEO permit. So
Right.
there is a distinction. Just want to be
Building.
clear. Building permit is easier,
mhm,
and so this we're trying to make easy.
It's a
Yes.
land use and building permit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so in that process, we're gonna add maybe a couple of sentences about, or a couple of provisions about, here's some data point, here's some plans that we think should be required for that. And we can try to figure out if there's some easy ways to add standards about removing, small scale ground mounted systems. That, I think that's what it is.
possibly, yeah.
I don't know what it looks like. You don't have to agree to it yet, but I can.
Sure, yeah, I personally like that idea, but that doesn't mean that that's how we should go. I'm always, when I see, storefronts, store building, big boxes abandoned and that sort of thing, I'm thinking like, why wasn't there a fund they were required to pony up, so it would be dealt with rather than just
Right.
deserted?
The big old satellite dishes that are still around.
I do, everywhere still,
I don't know.
What is it?
The big
like
old satellite
satellite
dishes.
dishes and.
Oh.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of toxin in the ground,
Yep,
so I'm thinking but I don't know how they get disposed of.
it's a good question.
It's a good question, hopefully Climate to Thrive folks would have some idea on that, or could talk to some, like, people at Revision Energy or something like that. Yeah,
I think it would be helpful for a climate to thrive just to come and answer questions about like, how does this system work? Like, but I would say that there's a difference between them explaining to you how they work and like the rules around
where they were,
land use.
yeah.
Siting.
Yeah. I think there isn't, in terms of, still with a small scale, of neighbors. I don't know whether we wanna try to address the issue of screening. Obviously you can't screen in front of them. But, I think of my own property and I've looked at it, I don't have enough solar panels on my roof, I can't put enough on my roof to make a huge dent in my electrical bill. But I've looked out in my field many times and thought, right over there, which is approaching one of my neighbors. And I thought, well, and they would be on the north side, and I thought, well, if I ever did that, I would want to screen that, so that they didn't have to look just at the backside of my solar panels. And I just don't know if we want to require that sort of consideration of abutting property owners, if we're gonna put a structure like that.
Sure, it's up to you guys.
I don't know what other people think about that.
I like the idea of it, I'm not sure how practical it might be, I don't know.
I'm trying to
Or
think of my
there's
own
so many
house, like
different
if someone put it
situations.
beside my head, like what would I want, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to look. I think that's gonna be interesting. Try to figure out how to write code for that.
If it meets the setback, since it's on the ground,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's offensive to the neighbor,
Mhm.
it might be incumbent upon the neighbor to take whatever
fence
steps
or
are
whatever, yeah.
necessary, whether they build a fence or a
Yeah.
hedge or
Mhm.
whatever.
And I think that's the reality of any structure that goes
Yeah.
up.
I
The neighbor
think,
might not like
exactly,
it.
that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just another structure that meets the setbacks, that is an allowable use within our town. If you
Gail,
don't like
you're
it, build a
Let's
fence.
be
I was
neighborly.
just gonna
No, I
say, you're a
agree.
very nice neighbor, yeah,
No,
but
it's-
not everybody may be, I mean,
Yeah,
Oh, I understand
yeah,
the idea behind it,
yeah,
yeah,
but I'm just saying, we're going down a rabbit hole that
yeah.
you
Well-
might not get back out of.
okay. Well, I think that's fine. I think that may be
That's
an
just my
entirely,
opinion.
no, that may be an entirely appropriate response to it. Um,
Yeah, I could try to come up with also some sort of graphic that illustrates like how big is a third of an acre. I mean, it's not a lot, but a third of an acre is huge. So we,
Yeah, it would be useful to know that and to get a sense of how many panels are we talking about? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't,
It all,
you know, those arrays are usually 2 or 3 panels,
yeah, I mean.
Tall.
15,000 square feet.
two panels tall usually, I think. Yeah.
It's not that much.
Okay,
you get all familiar with my wife's shop, Lorette, next to the Kittredge building.
yeah,
That's a tenth of an acre.
yeah,
Probably is
Okay,
probably 10th of an acre of
Yeah.
state road frontage there.
Really.
So then
okay,
there's a little grassy area in the back, so I bet that's about a third of an acre, that whole area. So it's not.
okay, it's not
huge.
huge, that's a good visual. Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, how big is that lot, like 10,000 square feet?
Yes,
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's
but a
like,
bunch of that is owned by the state up front, so it looks bigger than it really is.
yeah,
And then the land out back isn't hers either,
right,
so,
I mean, that's what I'm saying, even
Yeah.
on a roof is in particular. It's-
yeah.
Okay. Um,
So I can, just to close out small scale,
yeah,
I think I can make some tweaks. To come back with that. I had in the original draft, which I thought that I shared with you guys in June, I thought was a little, I had it separated. But it was a little confusing because it separated out roof mounted and then had small scale, so I needed to tweak it a little bit. But I
Yeah.
combined the two for this version, because I think first, you need to understand that it's a system. And there's different scales to that system, and then it is where that system is located, can either be on the ground or on the roof.
right. With respect to the dimensional standards for all solar energy systems, ground mounted shall not exceed 12 feet in height when oriented at maximum tilt. I would be interested to know how many panels that is on one of those. To get to 12 feet, is that 2 panels stacked on one another, or, I mean, what is that? Is that a standard installation or?
Katrina, what are cause you said you use yours as like a fencing, but how many panels? Who knows?
We
Yeah,
had 8 panels, 6
Yeah.
panels. And each panel is one,
one, okay,
Yeah.
but they're very long, they're very
Yeah.
tall.
yeah,
Yeah, hot water
okay.
panels are different than solar
Right,
panels,
okay,
than
oh,
electrical
okay.
panels.
So do you wanna differentiate?
I was just gonna
That's a
say,
good
so
question.
how do we differentiate then
That's a good question. I don't know, is anybody installing hot water panels these days?
between the hot
Electrical
water
generation and the hot water?
Electric.
Hot water panels.
I don't think, how many people install hot water? systems
Katrina
now?
did.
I don't, yeah, but how long have you had it?
Why is it,
I mean, they were more popular at one point.
but I mean, in terms of the land use perspective, why does it matter?
It does, it shouldn't.
No,
Okay,
I'm not.
do they come in a set size
I think
that's
we're
that different than,
complicating
I know, why? Like,
So this is a highlighted question, Gail, and the reason it's highlighted is because in the draft, which I thought was an interesting discussion point, is that they
Yeah.
said, hey, if you meet, our setback is 10 feet
yeah,
in some areas, so it can only be 12 feet high.
okay,
Or in this version, it is if you meet a farther setback, so it needs a little bit of work. If you like the concept,
yeah.
then, we'll give you more height if you increase your buffer.
So 12 feet's like sort of a single story-ish thing?
Yeah.
And, okay. I think that makes some sense. If it's right up against your neighbor, then that's more of a problem than if it's. further away.
Yeah. And so there are some zones where I think the maximum setback we have anywhere in town is 25 feet, is that right?
Maximum?
Well, shoreline.
I think it's 25.
Maximum, no, we got 15.
The maximum required setback in anywhere in town would be
Oh, in town,
30 feet.
oh, sorry.
25 feet,
Um,
not the front, not the
10s, village residential, 15s, BR2. R1 and then was 25,
east, I
None larger than 25.
don't think so,
no,
for sides.
not for property, yeah, for side property.
Front
line
setbacks
setbacks.
are
25 is the max.
And you've got the lot coverage issue, then, and how to calculate that, it's only the mounting block?
Yep.
Or other impervious areas, rather than the size, the span of the panels themselves.
Oh.
That seems to make some sense. You have the other requirement that the panels are not gonna cover more than 30 acre. But that means that you're gonna you can crowd your lot quite a bit if what can you do now, 30% of your
It
lot?
varies, 40%, 20 in the shoreline.
Okay.
Village commercial 75.
I think that,
Okay.
so lot coverage
It's not.
in part is there to help
Okay.
sort of the.
Yeah,
You don't have.
Not
a
necessarily
side.
other
If you
reasons,
don't want
Okay.
so.
and
what
this
the
is not gonna
size
be
would
that big.
Like if you're,
Ten
if
if
you
you
have
want the
a pervious surface underneath your solar
But you only have
system,
a simple-
Yeah.
then the water will run off the panels and into the ground as opposed to a hard surface, which then they just run off and then somewhere else, so you have to come up with a different.
Somewhere in the ordinance, we're gonna have to allow goats.
Somewhere.
Allow goats so that you can keep the foliage underneath.
In order for lot coverage not to count, you have to have built.
That's right,
Or sheet.
yeah. Okay. Dear, do a good
But I
job.
don't, again, this is like a discussion point, so if
Yes.
that philosophically works for everybody.
It seems to. What else do we have before we move on
Also,
to
I
other
think it might be
exciting
helpful
tasks?
for you, in that you don't have to require, like, show me what the. You know, the shadow area is on a plan, so that you can. Determine what's lot coverage and what isn't. But, it's up to you.
Depends on what you guys want covered, not you, you and I, we don't live here. Depends on what you guys want to have as far as development and how cluttered and,
Obtrusive.
no, just,
That's a judgment.
I'm just saying no, but I mean.
Are you? Are you?
A solar
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Okay,
Good question, I mean.
Design review here.
are we about ready to move on to our other fun agenda item?
It's,
So you
Yeah,
guys,
we'll try to go
so
this
the
way.
height, just so I have some firmer direction, you know. The height exemption makes sense, I gotta modify the definition of height in the ordinance.
Yes.
Because we're adding solar energy, roof mounted solar energy
It's not the
systems to the height definition.
Yes,
That's one thing.
yes,
And then the question right now was, we're gonna keep large scale for now.
we're gonna keep it for now. And
It's super easy to do.
it's easy to remove, and if there's a bunch of people who. And I'm of mixed minds about it for sure, but it may be that. This sentiment will prevail, and I wouldn't be brokenhearted about that, but.
So again, not to, I know you're gonna move on, but the allowed uses table, since we're making a differentiation between roof mounted and ground mounted, there's gonna be another column. Row, another row, that is, solar energy systems, small scale, roof mounted, solar energy systems, small scale, ground mounted. And then, just to be clear, probably just say medium scale, you know, all types.
Yeah, yep,
Or both types or whatever, something
Yeah.
like that.
yeah,
And then I'm just gonna say this is where they're gonna go, and then you guys really need to pay attention to that, because it's not. up to
Right.
me.
Right. All right, so we have the, uses and definition. And I spent some time trying to begin to pour over those in earnest, and the only way I could think to do it, and maybe you have a much better way,
No.
is I had the current LUZO in front of me and those tables in front of me. And I went through much of it, and we're not gonna get through all of it today, that's for sure.
Does anybody need a copy of that?
Yep. Time.
And I first wanted to try to figure out which
Same like
things
data.
haven't changed.
Can I,
Yeah, I need
can I have this, the one that, definition?
Back to where I'm gonna be.
I think I need that now. Thank you.
And then I just started using your proposed
Thank you, sir.
new land use categories.
Yep.
And I went through and tried to
Whoops.
pair those with the definitions. And begin to figure out what it was we actually had to deal with as new or different content.
Yes,
And
actually, yeah.
yes,
So, and what you're summarizing is the way that I think we're gonna have to go through this exercise.
Yeah.
Which is, you have to have both things in front of you.
yeah,
And then you have to start with accessory residential dwelling units and just work your way
Go
down.
down.
yes. Yes. It's actually fun and games.
It's not.
No, it's not. Pro tip, it's not.
Yeah.
Accessory residential dwelling unit has not changed
Nope.
from the original code. So I have ticked off on my mind all the things that have not changed. Unfortunately, there aren't enough of them, but accessory structures residential, including additions and guest houses. I don't think I checked, I didn't check that, but that must not have changed because you've
It
already
hasn't.
got CEO. Which doesn't mean that we don't at some point look at those when we're talking about these uses.
Yeah.
Accessory structure commercial has not changed. Affordable housing development, the definition of that is new. There are other definitions, there are other definitions that we are gonna have to go through that are not in the use table.
Accessory, what's it, accessory structure commercial, no?
That's me.
Oh, the current one.
No, yes, it is, commercials. Page
I don't
three
have my own
seven,
one. I don't have my, what's it?
page 3-7.
Oh, I see what you're, like, he just
Yeah.
broke it different.
Yeah, he broke it, he's
Never mind,
breaking out
yes.
differently.
Yeah, it doesn't have commercial and recreational.
Correct, we're trying to get
Okay.
away with those headings.
All right,
Get
yeah,
rid of
no,
those
you're
headings.
Yeah, don't, so the principle of the exercise is taking
Okay.
a look at your legends.
Yeah,
We're going through it alphabetically, basically, right, in these different chunks of uses. Affordable but the other thing we have to bear in mind is that there are new definitions that are beyond just the uses, and we could decide to not deal with those now and just keep going through the use table, but we are gonna have to go back and look at those new definitions separately if we want to. Maybe that makes sense, or we should just
Yeah, I don't know if we need to debate whether that definition makes sense today, now.
right.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we do have the affordable housing development definition, which is on the second page of the proposed definitions. I wonder why, I get it, but I wonder why internet service isn't included as an essential utility. I get, cable and that crap, but we don't, sorry, I don't have cable, so I don't care. But why would we not, in this day and age, think that when you're calculating what the costs are, that internet's in there too?
I don't.
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm not sure that's the. Have to go back and.
There may be a HUD definition here. that would be-
Probably not a necessity.
Okay,
Right.
in this day and age, I don't know. But anyway. Agriculture, affordable housing development. That's a new definition. Agriculture commercial is not a new definition. Agricultural piggery and poultry are,
Right, but you might just see, so some of these, we might say,
they're a little bit confusing because,
well, we already kind of cover those under the animal husbandry rules.
yes,
So in our, this version, like, I think I added some terms that we've seen in other places that you could substitute or just say, you know what, we don't need piggery, we've already got it covered under animal husbandry.
unless there are certain animals you want the keeping of which would be particularly noxious, and obviously probably pigs fall in that, and any number fall in that category, but,
Right.
um,
I think
Rooster.
piggery
Yeah,
is, there's
rooster,
probably a
good,
size to that. in the
Mhm.
definition. Is there like a number, is there like a scale, for the definitions for piggery?
2 or fewer sows,
or 20 if you were head,
is a head boy.
yeah, no, it's just animals. Which are considered agricultural operations, keeping or designated to keep more than 200 head, which are prohibited.
So that.
We have 200 pigs,
Right, so that's the reason that.
Just the heads.
Not allowed.
just that, sorry, I guess that's okay.
So are you,
Or said.
are you looking also to see who has jurisdiction?
We could be at this point, maybe we don't do that, maybe we just, well, we could be walking through and saying, well, if you're gonna allow this. My suggestion right now is, this is gonna be like a lengthy back and forth.
Yep.
You really don't need to be in any hurry.
Right.
Do it. It does make sense for the land use ordinance to have something like this, so if we can all agree on that principle.
Yes,
Mhm.
Then we should be working kind of methodically through it, but don't feel pressure to get through all of it, except for, so when we do this, I think this is where you're heading, Gail, which is, let's just. Even tonight, just try to figure out if this makes sense. We could do it a couple of different ways. One, you could say, well, we've agreed that affordable housing development is. That seems like a good allowed use. Where would they be allowed in town?
correct,
Right, because aren't we
Yes.
having that problem right now?
yes,
Right,
You
so,
could do it now, or you could do. we could-
no, I mean, don't we have an issue right now in town with this
Yeah.
going on, right?
right,
I haven't filled it out. That was where I think you're getting at, because I'm not gonna make a determination. Like, that's something we need to do together.
right,
Yeah,
right. So,
Unless you want me to, let's do it.
and we can certainly, my goal initially is to get us all conversant with it.
Yeah.
To get us all more fluent with it, so that we can then maybe see some of the bigger pictures and we can then. But, you know, we have to just, what we do at some point have to decide, is this something we're gonna try to roll with for this year?
right.
Can we go back to piggery, because.
Yes.
I just like saying the word, but do we want commercial pig farms in the town of Otisar?
No.
I wouldn't think so. but-
No,
So isn't that an easy one just to say no, thank you too? And
yes,
would the same be true with, poultry farms? We don't want commercial, we don't mind if you have a few chickens.
We don't want
Right.
50 or.
But Beach Hill
more.
Farm is kind of,
Oh,
yes,
I mean, they don't process like chickens and stuff there, but they do,
Do they have more than 6 chickens?
I'm sure,
I'm sure they do.
yeah.
yeah,
What about Sweet, not Sweet Pea, the other one,
They're in
triple
Baja.
But
chick?
even if,
It's in the
Oh,
harbor.
the harbor, right, sorry.
even if we did include that in the LUZO, Beach Hill Farm would be exempt because they've been doing it prior to the inclusion of it. in the
maybe
LUZO.
grandfather, no,
Not necessarily, because they always are expanding,
Yeah.
adding greenhouses.
Well, they wouldn't be able to expand in terms of their operation.
No more.
Unless you
based
do a
on-
conditional use.
Based on what the definition is, but I believe the preface
No, I
to the
meant-
LUZO
yeah.
clearly states that, you know, anything that predates the establishment or changes of, to this document shall not be affected adversely by the creation of the document or some such language
yeah,
to
yeah,
that effect, so
yes,
Beach Hill Farm would be allowed to continue what they're doing as of May 6th or 5th or
But they
whenever it
couldn't
gets
Yeah,
voted.
expand it.
yeah,
Correct,
Right,
any expansion would fall under the new LUZO.
right,
which is what, 50 or fewer, is that, or is it 50 or fewer bird chickens?
The 200,
And 200 is,
more than 200 versus.
Okay. which are prohibited,
if,
okay.
um. If the principle is gonna continue to be that we have the ability to approve something that is like things on here, which we do now, versus this is the complete list, and if it isn't on here, you can't do it. That's a different situation, it seems to me, because then you just remove piggery.
Yeah.
And it's not on this use list and you can't do it.
Theoretically,
So it's two different approaches. Right now, we've got the, well, if you can make the argument that it's
You
like.
still
stuff
have that
we
in
do.
here. Uses that are similar to uses,
Right,
still in here, uses similar to uses requiring a CEO permit, or uses similar to uses requiring a CEO.
right. So I guess we have to decide if we want that policy, and we may want to. Then I guess we have to just put.
I mean, you
X's through
can't have
piggery.
every use in a
Right.
chart. You
Can't
just-
Right.
see it all.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can't.
So how would it be as Katrina asked to score a bunch of X's through piggery and poultry?
And what about cows and everything else? Does it sound
That's easy.
husbandry?
Well, we'll get to that in husbandry, yeah.
you're in, on principle. The principle of what you're talking about is the way that an allowed uses table is supposed to work. That it's what we're saying as a community is, these are the things that are allowed in town.
Yes,
If they're not on the list. then
They're not in
allowed.
town.
then you need to get specific approval from the town to add to the list.
Correct.
Right,
Technically, that's how it's.
right. That's what I thought. That's what I thought we're kind of, that's why we were going through all of this. One of the
Well,
reasons.
see, they would be agriculture anyways, they wouldn't be piggery, they wouldn't be poultry,
Who, Beach Farm?
yep. That's what they are
It's
anyway, because they have vegetables, greenhouse,
Yeah.
they do poultry, livestock, fruits, vegetables, herbs, crops, grain, they have all that stuff, dairy.
And there's none of them.
And so if you compared like animal husbandry to what piggery is like much more specific.
Mhm.
And that all animal husbandry says is the care and keeping of livestock and domestic animals, but there is no scale.
I mean, you could probably
So
put X's
theoretically,
across
yeah.
piggery right now.
The VR,
Yeah, I-
in the VR1 district right now, you could have a pig
Chickens.
farm
Perfect.
if you got conditional use approval.
Hmm.
That's what it says
That's not, yeah, but is that
right now.
consistent with the neighborhood, is that a good
I'm
character?
just saying, if the planning board
Yeah,
were.
if they-
We have that compatibility
Depends on which
provision
neighborhood.
now.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't know.
Compatibility.
Yeah.
on that.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. So, I mean, the other big problem with piggery is just, is the effluent and the environmental impact is.
I think I just put.
So we
X's
just put
all the way
X's
across.
through piggery.
But I want to also highlight that one and say like, again, down to animal husbandry, like those are the things that exist in your town right now.
Is there
Right.
anyone in the town of Mount Desert that's got more than 50 pigs that we know of?
No,
Not
I
even
don't know of
retail.
any that
Yeah.
have pigs that at least come to the.
Well, that-
or the
yeah.
town
Yeah.
for approval,
And
anyway.
there is no distinct, there's no
Yeah.
definition of commercial.
You'd smell it.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And I can
Definition is
call.
not
You can-
agricultural
I know I can.
Yeah.
So again, agriculture poultry is for a larger scale. You can keep 50 or fewer birds. And that's agriculture. Agriculture poultry is a more concentrated or operation, and that is, operations keeping or designed to keep more than 200 birds. We can allow, I mean, the current definition of agriculture allows up to 50. I know, but we don't,
It doesn't have a number,
well,
but we also gotta make sure we're not, going against what state law was that just got adopted, or
Oh,
remember the people that wanna raise their food?
oh,
well,
No, but seriously, no,
Yeah,
I'm not
it's-
picking
yeah,
on them,
no,
I'm just
no.
saying that is a
a
state
thing.
law.
even if they're in a tent, like in a, not a rural, it's more like a
well,
tent, like
that
in
was
their
the
backyard. they
constitutional
can,
amendment that people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even no matter where, if they're neighbor,
They
it
wanna
doesn't
raise their
matter.
food and they
Thought
wanna
they
kill
were-
it and they wanna eat it, they wanna provide for their
Yeah.
families. They
Yeah, I
gotta
think
be
we're
careful
talking
of that.
about commercial
Yeah, I was
scale
just gonna say,
poultry
then you're right.
farms.
Right, that's what, so agriculture poultry is probably the easy one to eliminate, I would think.
I think, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put X's all the way across, but we could just take it right off the list.
Agricultural,
Piggery too, or not? Or just like-
we don't, do we have
I
a
know I do,
definition
yeah.
for product processing? I didn't see it, I don't, because I tried to match it with,
Yep, it may not be there.
For what?
the next one, agricultural product processing, community scale and industrial scale, I did not see a definition. in this sheet. So we might need, if we're gonna have that in there, we might need definitions. Ambulance fire station, are there reasons to wanna restrict where the town might wanna cite ambulance or fire stations?
Compatibility.
Yeah, but if you felt like you needed a fire station on the backside in a rural area, if you needed there's a fire station in Seal Harbor.
Where does
There's
it
a
currently
fire-
allow under municipal?
Well,
No,
it's a
in the
new
current- well, no,
definition.
in the current ordinance, under what?
Municipal
Municipal
activities,
activities.
conditional, and then XXX, which is
Yeah, but what
conservation.
zones? So that allows it in quite a few zones.
Yes, if
So
it's
I would say-
municipal activities, it's all the way across to the last three,
Then I would say every zone except for the last three.
right?
What are the, oh, VR, okay,
Resource
SP.
protection,
Resource
resource protection
protection.
and VR 2, 3. That's just the ESTA code.
Well, we should make a new fire station.
That's
I
kind
will
of
say, living on the main street in Sundsville,
That's
it's
funny
been
that you have
interesting to now have
allow
an active fire
in
station
the
down
rural
the road.
resource.
I had no
protected
idea how
zone.
many times they would be going out.
Well, there isn't really much you can do in resource protection,
It's. a
Except
big
protect it.
noise.
except for protecting. Yeah,
Is
well,
that
you're
what
dealing
fire
with,
stations
well, you're
do?
dealing with topography, floodplain, that's why it's resource protection.
Animal shelter.
Yeah.
This is a facility and it's definitely defined as owned, operated, maintained by a public body, a humane society or other nonprofit organization. Now, I think you had an issue in the town of Northeast Harbor a couple of years ago.
I did.
And
It's still
Yeah,
kind
but
of a
that
little
wasn't
bit of
an
an
animal
issue, isn't
shelter,
it?
it was,
No, but,
somebody that just took it
yeah,
upon
yes, yes.
yeah,
to collect animals and.
So Kim, if somebody came right now and said, I wanna start an animal shelter, is there anything in the ordinance that would allow that? You just say no. this-
I would say there's no use, I mean, they could certainly, say to me, I see something in the ordinance, I'd be like, where? And then I would say no, and then they could appeal me, and then they go to the
And then they end up,
conditional use, but
Yeah.
no, there's nothing,
No,
we don't even have a hospital in here. Either,
Which
So-
I think we do first.
well, I mean.
Yeah, but now, it's the same. principle, right? So, get back to Rick's, keep it simple, land use ordinance perspective, like. This complicated effort that we're going through is actually in the effort of making the ordinance better and not more complicated, just so we're all aware.
yes, yes,
This is a
health
great-
institution.
But it's actually hopefully better for the ordinance than not.
Makes it more user friendly, that's for sure.
That's the goal. So we don't need to make a decision about animal shelter, but, a noise is always a big issue with those sorts of facilities.
You don't have a noise ordinance.
Right. And so when you get a bunch of unhappy animals. Same thing with boarding
Don't?
facility.
Oh, Lord, that probably lied.
I mean, you can allow those like in the commercial districts.
Mhm.
We don't have a noise ordinance?
Nope.
Oh, I might have lied to a few people.
These were good cuts.
People that, employees, I'm like, you have to be quiet by 10 o'clock. All right,
You
well,
can have a- you can
I'm
have
gonna keep going
a
then with
house
that.
ordinance, but
Yeah, yeah,
Disturbing the peace.
yeah.
Things
And
of
then I
that
just like,
nature.
I'm gonna keep going with it.
Animal husbandry, 1 and 2, the care and keeping of lives. Now I got. The care, animal husbandry 1, care and keeping of livestock and domestic animals. Is that my dog?
Must
Yeah.
be.
Domestic animal.
So I'm not,
Yeah.
so you could like say, you can't have a dog in this part of town if you, and we were gonna try to regulate that?
Yeah, so for this one,
Yeah, no.
Gail, I would say the reason that like that is in your ordinance now.
Yeah.
And that if we're doing things like piggery,
Mhm.
poultry, and some of these other ones,
Mhm.
because that term become not, we don't need it anymore because we're more specific otherwise. So
Yeah.
I'd kind of put a question mark next to that one, so when we get through this exercise, we may go back to it and say, you know what? We
Yeah,
don't need animal husbandry because it actually conflicts with agriculture, piggery,
yeah.
or some of the other things that we may have added to
You
it.
just crossed them all out though.
I would potentially
No, I meant the piggery and the poultry.
Right, we're not,
We just crossed off of
Right.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
you can revisit it.
No, I put X's on them.
I
so
did
they're not
too.
allowed anyway.
Yeah, they're not allowed
but
in.
there's agriculture commercial, which is allowed in a rural district. I do think we probably need to get, there is an equine
Horses, yeah.
thing too. This discussion about
Hmm.
that in here.
Well, you could just get rid of and domestic animals.
Yeah, maybe
as a
take that off.
definition.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never.
Well, are
told
horses
someone they can't
considered
have-
domestic once they're in a barn living, you know, they're not wild if they're, I mean,
Where did you get
They're
into
considered a
emotional
hoofed.
support?
They're an
oh, they're a
animal.
hoofed animal.
They're a
Holy
hoofed animal.
cow. Okay.
So
That's
they're
a
under
whole other-
hooked.
Okay, wow, okay.
I
Yeah,
seriously,
we-
I would delete-
Somehow we need to make this more clear, that
Just take out
the way we
Delete
group the
husbandry.
whole animal stuff.
I would have,
See?
when we get through
Yeah,
this.
can't we just
I would
have
just-
one?
Cattle, goats, horses,
Agree in
pigs,
favor of-
Pigs are bad.
llamas.
Yeah, we
Maybe
just have
llamas.
one
Wait,
animal.
wait.
Oh.
Wait a minute, wait.
I know.
I would probably strike through animal husbandry in favor of having more specifics like we have, or like the other examples that we've already got.
The pigs and the chicken
Yes.
and other barnyard, you'd have to deal with other barnyard animals and.
Anything hoofed.
Correct.
Right.
That's under hooked.
And pigs are under hoofed.
Llamas.
What do you do with emotional support animals?
Emus,
Are you raising them domestically?
cassowaries,
Yeah, who knows? Huh,
okay,
okay.
aquaculture, commercial scale, community
Wow.
scale, there's a commercial agriculture.
Is this like the
provision,
oyster farms
But
or?
there's no community scale, and I didn't know kind of what that is.
Is there a definition of that?
No.
No.
It's aquaculture, period. The growing or propagation of harvestable freshwater, estuarine, or marine plants or animal species, and that's in the current code as well. So we seem to have it in the commercial section and, but then there's this thing in your use table of community scale aquaculture, and I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, let me look at that. I think it will probably be the intensity of the operation.
Assisted living facility.
Also, I think, are we also?
Could you
talking
have to
about-
do, I mean, can you do residential aquaculture? For yourself?
I think that's what I'm thinking, like if I wanted.
Because I know where there's one and somebody's doing it privately.
Yeah, like I wanna raise,
They grow
I wanna
oysters.
grow mussels in.
Yeah.
whatever.
Oh, neat, in the, or
In the
fresh water,
ocean.
in the ocean, right in front of there or whatever, yeah,
In front of their property.
but they obviously aren't selling that, or,
No,
right, so it's
No,
just for
it's
them.
for them.
I assume you're gonna have to
And-
talk to DEP about that.
Oh,
I
I'm
still
sure,
think-
yes.
I have to look this one up a little bit more. I still think that, whatever happens in the ocean, if I can go and get a license to do commercial aquaculture in anywhere, you can go through the harbor committee or whatever you need to do to get some sign off. What we're still talking about is what are the land use
Yes,
implications of that, not necessarily what you do.
Right.
Out in the ocean.
right.
But isn't there like the high water mark and all that, people argue about what is their land, what is in,
Yep.
when it,
Have you talked about high watermark lately in your world, do you think?
yes, a lot, so that's why I was like,
But-
oh, so what happens when it, like, you can't grow, you must have to do the oysters. Right, I mean, who says how much ocean you
So
own?
when you get
or
a,
this-
when you get an aquaculture license, there's an actual process you have to go through the state.
Yes.
to get
Marine
An
resource.
aquaculture license, which requires
Okay.
input from the
Hmm.
town, and it's more likely from the harbor master and the harbor committee than it will be from anyone else. And then
Even if it's
where-
personal
and- Yeah,
use.
yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
and then where the land use link comes in is when, as soon as you get off the boat,
Yes,
how do you process it?
yes,
Where are the trucks
Yeah.
coming from?
Yes.
What are the traffic implications? What are the processes that you are going through? Those are the implications that you're concerned about here.
yes, and what's the waste product and,
Do we
Yeah,
have
or-
any?
Or if you're
We
like,
don't have any commercial
uh,
yet,
you want, there are aquaculture proposals in other towns that
yeah,
that are land-based aquaculture processing facilities. where
Yes.
they're growing fish, drawing water from the resource.
Wasn't that a big to do over on the other side of the island?
I think it's
What's
done.
that?
Wasn't there a big to do with
Places.
that on the other side of the island?
I don't know if it was on
Lemoyne,
NBI,
was it
maybe.
Yeah, I thought there was a big,
Wasn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, a big problem in Trenton.
yeah, wasn't it
Was it
Trenton in that area?
Well, there, I mean, I know that there's mussel people,
Yeah,
there's, one of the mussel companies has a place in Trenton.
maybe that's, yeah.
That's not a bad thing, it's
No,
just
yeah.
like, how do you know?
Right.
Is it that new
Manage it.
building over by the
Yeah.
airport?
Yes,
Yes,
Yeah.
didn't it burn down, but they
Yes,
rebuilt,
And
yeah,
they're great,
Okay.
those guys are
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Really good
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and they're.
Yeah, they are.
Great people and.
Yep.
So they're two, but from a land, it's from a,
Mhm.
it's a different perspective, so the land side stuff and then the
Mhm.
water side stuff is like different.
so it currently is shoreline commercial and village commercial where they're allowed and otherwise not. If it's commercial, but I don't know what, we'll figure out what community scale means.
Yep.
Assisted living facility,
Why
We
you
don't
Brussels there? I guess you
currently
can process them.
provide for that. I think we have. There was some, where did I read some discussion about the different sizes of assisted
Yeah,
living?
But they can do it, I guess.
There was a 6-person and then
I
a,
don't know.
Not
In the
here.
I
definition,
thought you had to be fresh, I mean.
yeah, it was something
Okay.
today, I was looking at that.
Do you need to cross that then? or-
yeah, like if somebody wanted to come here and do, there are some assisted living facilities which are like very small scale.
Yeah.
Yes,
Or
Yeah.
any of them, I mean,
Yes.
maybe a Birch Bay.
oh, group home, that was the thing.
Yeah. They're
Cause
not-
what is the
they're not
housing
allowed-
considered?
Apartments,
Make
Maple
it-
Lane, Maple Lane apartments.
Is that assisted living?
Well,
It's-
no,
No, it's public
no,
housing,
Yeah,
It's help-
they can
yeah.
live on their own.
so it's not
Some,
assisted.
Or, I mean, but yeah, I mean,
There's some there.
there's
I guess
some there that live.
it's
Yeah.
independent living and they provide additional
Yeah.
services.
Yes,
as-
that's the way to put
as
it,
you
yeah,
Which is right,
yeah,
I think.
yeah, it is good. I think, I
And
mean,
so the question is really for our purposes is that is a gray area in our ordinance. And by adding
Mhm.
something like this, does it provide clarity so that, yeah, this is allowed and here they are.
yeah.
Here's
Right.
what's allowed.
Right, so, and then the question is, why wouldn't it be allowed in the same places that you allow other types of residences?
Yeah, good question. Parking,
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
traffic,
mhm.
I don't know why. Actually, I think, like Mary and I had somebody that we were helping out every once in a while, and they moved this guy to someplace like out in way past Hancock. It was in like the middle of something, middle of the woods somewhere. I was like, what is happening up here?
Yeah,
But,
uh,
you know.
because
it's
there's
not-
nothing,
Sure,
it's it's a huge problem.
yeah.
there's
Uh-huh.
more to it than just the sighting of it, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Right, so we wanna work on figuring out where we can allow those, it seems, auction house.
Yep.
Parking.
I mean, they do them all the time at Neighborhood House, isn't that where they do auctions right now?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and that's.
Nice, Peter.
Thank
Good
Bye,
night.
Katrina.
Right.
And I guess that's
Is that too
okay.
much fun?
Yeah. I mean, that's okay, at Neighborhood, I mean,
I don't know what the definition is, but.
Mhm.
if it's,
A facility or place used for a public sale in which goods or property are sold to the highest bidder.
I mean, that would be like, I can't imagine anybody developing something like that here,
Mhm.
but, you know, if I just said,
I'm
talk to Jerry. we're
Yeah,
business
Jerry
partners
wants to
now,
build
we wanna-
one, yeah.
We wanna build our own space,
yeah,
should you be able to do that? Why not? Put it as a conditional use
it's
and,
business, I mean,
and this is why you need site plan, but yeah,
Right,
yeah,
well, it would be a business, but then you'd have the issue, like I said, you'd have to figure out what the issues are and the requirements would be.
yeah.
I imagine that you get a lot of
I mean,
parking.
but couldn't that be something that's occurs or is done in a public building?
it can.
Yeah, that's a separate thing, yeah, that's a different thing.
But I mean,
It's
if you
a
really need to
pre-existing building.
establish this use, do you think?
I mean,
Alright,
I don't see people screaming,
no,
knocking down doors to do
to
that.
put up one.
no, but it could have, you know, the thing we're trying
But I
to do
mean, a
is.
public,
Yeah.
I think of renting a public building like the fire station in Seal Harbor to have like an
Right.
auction, I think
Yeah.
that's,
Fine, or
yeah.
a
I think
neighborhood
that
house,
should-
they have, what does
something,
Jerry have,
yeah,
one a week
that's a
in the
community,
summer?
Yeah,
or-
it's a community.
So you could
building.
say a facility or place used exclusively as an auction house, as
Yep.
opposed to.
Oh, yes, instead of renting,
renting a
yeah.
home.
Yeah.
That seems to me, you
Mhm.
could, might be able to,
Mhm.
you might wanna be a little tighter about that. Um,
On
Oh,
a
yeah.
graveyard, oh, God.
yeah, maybe, Automobile graveyard, yes, we have the definition of automobile graveyard. Do we just wanna put a,
That's
can we put a
state
bunch of
statute.
X's?
Is
That's
it,
a
so
state-
it,
Yeah, I mean, no, you're allowed to have them, but you have to go through the board of selectmen to get a license. And the only person that had them that I know of was Dana Haynes,
Mhm.
and he no longer has them, and, or had them, you know, he stopped a while ago. But typically, this isn't something that you wanna see next to you, you don't
Right.
wanna see it driving down to your, you know,
No.
road, I mean.
Right.
This is like a state law that's, and a junkyard, I mean, these should be all X's.
So I did have
Okay.
this come up in another community where it was all X's and it was a much more rural place, so I would say, and then somebody was like, well, what about this? And everybody was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But here, I agree with Kim, I think
X
you're
it out.
probably, may not be the kind of use that you're.
No, I
Looking
won't.
for.
Well, when is it considered a junkyard? Is that like 3 junk cars or is it one
A
junk
junkyard
car?
means a yard, field, or other outside area used to store, dismantle, or otherwise handle discarded, worn out, or junked plumbing, heating supplies, electronic or industrial equipment, household appliances or furniture, discarded scrap and junk lumber, old, that's a junkyard. You see, a junkyard is very
Yeah,
broad.
but is it, well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, who's saying what is it junkyard and what is that?
It's state law.
Camp or is it the state? Yeah, is it
It's
one car and
statute.
one toilet
No,
or
it's
no?
the statute,
Okay.
and it
It's right here.
depends,
Right.
it's
This
more
statute,
like
yeah.
complaints and seeing
Okay.
what people do over the years, cause I can look at aerial photos.
Oh, okay, yep, okay. Cause I'm gonna say,
Through the
one
years,
person's
which I
junk
use
is another
often.
man's treasure, is that
Right.
what that?
Right now, my backyard is a junkyard.
No,
Auto washing facility, well, we've got repair and sales and service and filling, we've already got uses for those.
but you can have it in our,
Why would a washing facility be different than a service or repair place?
Cause it's not the same. And I tell you right now, I've had somebody that wants to put one,
a car
and
wash. Wow.
we didn't have it in the ordinance,
In town or out of town, or,
across from the Soulsville one stop.
oh, yeah, in the back, well,
Oh.
it kinda makes sense. I mean, at least it made a little bit more sense than in the middle of town, but, I mean, I don't,
But it wasn't a use on the table,
Right.
and I couldn't class it, it's not repairs, it's not
Right.
sales.
it's a wash, it's a
Yeah.
auto wash. Can you limit where it is?
Yeah, you can
I mean-
say,
Well, I would say,
I'd say-
like.
is that village commercial?
If I were to go across, I would say.
Yeah,
you know,
so that lot that must be for
commercial
sale now.
or-
Yes, I think
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
There you go, Steph, new business.
Oh, geez, I got enough problems. Yeah, but I mean, I can see where that lot makes sense. As soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a bank of gas. It's not like in the middle of, I don't know, Pretty Marsh or something.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't know. I
It's
guess
close to
that,
my house, be careful.
well, yeah, but I mean,
But
it-
the land use changes.
Yeah.
So we could arguably make it conditional in the village commercial.
So keep in mind, village
Yeah.
commercial
Is
is Sylvan
northeast,
City,
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
it's
then I would
Northeast
say-
Harbor, it's
We
Seal
can't
Harbor.
I
say,
wouldn't ask that, I would say, again, back to the question, which is, does Sylvan City, should Sylvan City be village commercial? Or
Yes.
Should it be something else?
yeah. I know.
Rather than say, like, we already know what, we have a village commercial in our minds. And we think that, like, out in Soamesville
it would make sense in that spot.
or in town, does that make sense? You know, then I would
Guess it
say
depends
that,
on
then
where
I
in
would
town.
put to the ordinance, which we need to do anyway, through the comp plan and say, look, I mean, some of our zones don't make sense.
Right.
I don't know if
And
necessarily.
This
in
is
Northeast
another
it would.
question, like, this is gonna interface a lot with comp plan discussions too.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
looking.
It's
And
all,
that's not to say like, I
kind of up
think
in the
you're
air.
building this, and then in the future,
You've
this
gone through
could
the first
change.
page.
Yeah,
Is the plan to go through all of this?
No,
Because
No.
if it is, I need to excuse myself.
no, no, we are gonna, if we don't, the furthest we'll get is 7.
Should be a topic of discussion every meeting,
Yes,
go through parts of it,
yes, that's our goal.
and we'll get there.
I mean, I'm fine with the wash, but it just, I don't know how much you can limit. I mean, can you just say, oh yeah, that one lot in Soamesville could do it?
No,
I mean, right,
spot
that's what I'm
zone,
saying, so I don't.
No,
It would have to be like, you know, we don't care if
I don't think
the,
spot zoning is a good idea.
No, well, exactly, that's,
Seal Harbor,
Oh, God, can
You
you
know,
imagine
behind
running
the-
Steel Harbor?
Behind the
Yeah,
restaurant,
I
there's
mean,
a car
yeah.
wash, and I mean, it's all village commercial.
that's what I'm saying, so, yeah.
So Kim's right, like, if we change this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Then somebody in Silver
Could
City
come.
can put up a car wash.
Yeah.
Which is,
Okay,
But you can't say the same, is it compatible and all that in this area? Can you,
What,
No.
what is compatible?
no,
well, that's what I'm saying, okay.
okay.
yes, you
Skip.
can.
Bank. That has not been previously defined, apparently, and we don't have a specific use for that, but obviously we have banks. So we have to figure out what zones banks are and are not
Isn't it
allowed.
in the LUZO?
I think banks isn't allowed.
It
to
is,
use
it is,
table.
and allowed
Is it?
use.
But there's no definition.
Right, there's no definition. It's like banks, it's office building or something, banks, I think.
Yeah, so you think about it, looking
Retail,
Bar Harbor, was it
commercial
Camden National and
services.
Town Hill? That's a little out there, but makes sense.
Oh, yeah, see what we did was,
Yeah, I'm in commercial.
whatever, I don't even know what page it's on, but we did take, there is office building, bank.
Yeah.
Office building bank, yeah, okay.
So I think we ought to just decide, let's just put bank
Mhm.
and then cross office building bank off and just use the same.
And the only place it's allowed is village commercial.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Bar, tavern, cocktail lounge.
Oh,
Hello.
you can have it.
I'm gonna say, what are the rules right now? Is it village commercial or none or what?
Town office.
I don't think.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Right next door.
Probably a restaurant.
No, there's nothing in there for that.
So there's nothing for just a
No,
bar,
no.
tavern.
No.
So right now, like, if I wanted to build a new bar in town, you have to say no. Unless I called it a restaurant.
So you'd have to serve, so
Because
what
that-
defines a restaurant?
Well, the
Food
bar
Serving
is,
the food
Food.
and drinks.
and drink,
and the bar, the food is incidental.
right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
so no one could build just a pub or a bar, I mean, just serve alcohol, they'd have to serve food. But what defines food? Peanuts? Or
No,
is
no,
it like
no,
a
that
meal?
would, that's when
Yeah.
that's incidental to the service of alcohol or drinks. It's, in fact, it's defined in here, a facility or structure primarily devoted to the serving of alcoholic beverages with the service of food incidental to the consumption of such beverages, peanuts. This definition includes meeting places
Yeah,
or
I
other
mean,
facilities
yeah.
of nonprofit organizations, we're looking at the Elks Club here,
Yeah,
that are licensed to serve alcoholic
What, you're
beverages.
talking about the Elks Club?
yeah.
I know, but that's, we're talking about organizations.
Yeah, I know,
This
right,
is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Restaurant,
Yeah.
restaurant.
Restaurant, right.
But that's a bar,
Yeah.
basically.
I haven't seen
Food,
that.
right, for the
Yeah.
public.
Yeah.
Love that place. I was almost in there doing today.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah,
So,
But that's basically a bar, right?
well, part of it, yeah, but no, I would say there's more that happens at the Elks Club than just the
Mhm.
bar, but.
yeah,
that's-
blood drives and everything else going on there.
I would
That's
say
it.
if you just take the social parlor, that's a bar.
Okay,
Right,
Yeah,
but it's a
they-
benevolent service organization.
okay.
So
Yeah,
like
no.
Cottage Street Bar in Bar Harbor, the one by Route 66, I think they are just alcohol, I don't think, so
Yeah, they
that
are.
little
Yep.
place, or what is
Yep.
it, the Barnacle or
Yeah,
whatever,
Barnacle's
okay,
one.
so
Yep.
they are just, okay, just alcohol.
What Jetties used to be.
Oh, well, that would be a whole nother, yeah,
So
that used to be a lot of
currently we
things.
do
That
not
used to,
allow
yeah,
those.
in the
Yeah.
early 90s.
That's right, when I.
Yeah,
used
When
to
they had the
go-
outdoor courts,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, those
Now
were
it's
the
Geno's.
days,
Yeah, Jenny's in name only.
Okay.
that's right, there was no.
So we need to
there.
decide at some,
A lot of alcohol, okay,
Dancing.
dancing, yeah, okay,
are we ready?
yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with it.
We need to decide if we want to allow bars, tavern, cocktail lounge in the town
I
limits.
think we could do a lottery here in town. That'd be
I
awesome.
think that would be fabulous. Or
Well, you
just
don't
a
live here.
bar, what do you, I
Isn't
mean,
there like
I mean, I don't,
above the, post office?
Yes,
oh, Masons,
Yeah,
right?
the Masons.
well, those are different. I would say that's a different thing, but yeah.
Okay,
If you just wanna, like, it's say, use.
Oh,
the
yeah, the
Barnacle
Masons
as
aren't
an
usually a
example.
place. to
Yeah.
drink.
Is something like the Barnacle what you want to allow in town?
I mean,
They serve oysters, but I would consider them.
but it's something small, I mean, I don't, I guess I shouldn't say, but it wouldn't bother. Maine.
So
I
think
mean,
we're
we
just-
aren't necessarily a
we're starting to
party
make some
town.
distinctions, but-
I mean, by
You
any
could get to
means.
be that way.
Well, yeah,
Could be.
you could be, you're right. I mean, I don't know, what, does Southwest Harbor have any that, no, they all serve food, just Bar Harbor.
Yeah, that would be the party.
Well, they have the next level.
They serve food.
I think if you
Most
decide,
bars do,
Yeah, that's what
and
I'm
it's
saying.
incidental to the
So,
sale of alcohol.
yeah, so I mean,
I think one of the things we should do, one of the many things we should do, we consider this, is we might wanna have somebody from the law enforcement community talk to us.
well,
What does it
that's
mean
true,
when you have a bar in your town?
Yeah.
I mean, when I long ago, when I worked as an assistant DA, you could name the bars, there were certain bars that they were a regular source of business for me. So,
yeah.
you know,
True, I mean, yeah, I don't, yeah. I
so
don't-
you have to just think about,
Mhm.
does it change the character of the town to have something that's just a bar? And is that something you wanna do?
I think
The
it
answer
depends
may
on
be
what
no,
line.
answer may be no. But,
Yeah.
maybe
That's a
just
good question.
sort of really
I just
expensive.
got back from Ireland, so maybe that's clouding my
Yeah,
judgment.
maybe just- yeah, just put a
Where it was
flag on that
everywhere.
Hmm?
Put a flag.
Yeah.
next
But
to
it
that
was
one,
fun.
get back to
Yeah,
it.
the pubs.
Yeah.
I think we're all thinking about bars now.
I know, bed and breakfast, small inn, bed and breakfast, small inn, in this definition is a facility offering sleeping accommodations to lodgers in 8 or fewer rooms for rent with no provision for cooking in any individual guest rooms, which
Mhm.
may or may not be required to include a private residence that is the innkeeper's principal, but is not required to include a principal residence as the innkeeper's principal residence. And then a lodger stays less than 30 days. So that's a freestanding bed and breakfast that does not have the owner living in it, and I guess that's a big decision. When and where, if it's 8 rooms. Do we still have some like operating in Somersville? You know?
I don't think.
No.
If I wanted to open a bed and breakfast in town,
What is the
there
premise?
isn't, I
Is that
can't,
considered
right?
bed and breakfast?
You call that a hotel?
Room now.
What?
Like, if I wanted to open a bed and breakfast in town, there's no provision for that.
You can only do it right now in your legal residence.
Like
And it
Maison
limits-
Suite,
Yeah,
used
and
to
it
be one,
limits
but they
you
live there.
to sell like 3.
Yeah.
In the ordinance?
Yeah,
So if you,
What's the term? What is it under?
it's under home occupation.
Okay.
Okay.
Did the
That's
people that used to
interesting.
have,
Buildings
Rock,
for sale as-
Gray Rocks.
Gray Rock, did they,
Is it?
they lived there too, right? Yeah.
Pardon?
But they had more
It is.
rooms, and then when they closed it for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
lost their grandfather.
They lost-
So
but now it
they
had
wanted
to be
open
open.
it again, they would have put down
Oh,
rooms. and they
Okay,
didn't
and the
fix it.
same, I guess, with Maison Suisse now, cause that was turned into a home.
Yeah,
And
and
so
so-
that's a house
Yeah,
now, yeah.
That would be interesting.
I think we need some bed and breakfasts in town.
I agree.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again,
I'm gonna be thrilled.
yeah,
when
this
our
would be a great
food's back.
question to sit to flag and say, all right,
Hmm.
we like the term, where should they be allowed?
Right.
Why not,
I mean, any,
you know?
I don't wanna say
And
anywhere,
then put them
but
The
as
short,
conditional
yes,
use.
before I had it changed, you weren't allowed to have bed and breakfasts as a home occupation in the shoreline zone,
oh,
now you
really?
can.
but now you can.
Yeah.
Cause there's some big homes down there
Yeah.
that someone could buy
Yeah,
someday
but there
and
was- in
say,
the ordinance-
here's 10 rooms.
Yeah,
like that.
in the
Yeah,
ordinance,
okay.
it says not in the
Not
shoreline
in the
zone.
shoreline,
Right.
which would be the perfect place to have them. in it.
Right.
Truly,
Ah.
yeah.
Right.
I'd be curious what
Yeah.
the unintended consequences of that are in our current housing climate, just as a thought exercise.
Well,
Well, big houses are not gonna be,
bought by, well, I
Yep.
shouldn't say that, but.
But then they're not gonna be turned into apartments, for example.
Correct.
But I
correct,
would say, like, the shoreline, we just might as well. For the exercise, you know, that's gonna be unlikely to be, market driven prices is gonna keep out any sort of like
Yeah.
apartments or whatever.
right,
Anyway. Interesting.
all right,
So
so,
can you have a bed and breakfast and they do have to live there as of right now?
To the- in-
To- as of
yes,
how
the
things
current
are right
ordinance,
now.
Yeah, and it limits the number of rooms and guests.
it makes it an actual small inn. Boarding house. Boarding house is 6 or fewer rooms or rooms, and meals are provided to occupants to leave for at least, and people are there for at least 1 week. Meals are available only to the occupants. That's the only other question you have to get into with bed and breakfast is, are they gonna have a little dining space that they allow other people to come and have meals there?
Unless you limit it to just your guests only.
Right, because it isn't in
No,
this,
I'm just saying, unless you,
yes,
limit it to just your guests.
You might wanna think about that.
No.
Like, Harbor Table, Harbor Cottage Inn is a good example of what you're,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Yeah,
And is it something, if there's a distinction in it?
and anyone can
Used to
go.
be what, the Lindenwood used to,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now they have you can get cocktails at small plates there,
Right, and anyone can go, I mean, we've been there, it's very nice, yeah.
but
So what are they considered, a boarding? or
no, no,
inn?
that's Southwest, but
That's, no, I know Southwest, but they're considered a
yeah,
bed and breakfast
Yeah.
there, yeah.
so, and a boarding house is sort of a different species of cat.
we have a boarding house.
We have rooming house.
You have, you have a boarding house provision here, 6 or fewer
I
rooms.
don't know if you want.
I'm not sure either, but
I know,
boarding kennel. That's a challenge, it seems to me. You,
Can you have a veterinary clinic here?
we have one in Soamesville,
well, that's a,
shouldn't she have that, go vet go? I
yeah,
hope so, 'cause that's where our dog goes.
Is that primarily mobile? Does it has
yeah, but she does have an office. in
She does have an
Somerville.
off,
But that's different than a boarding kennel,
Yeah.
although if
she's
you.
not kenneling it, I
Correct.
mean. That I know.
I mean, you got the question of, I mean, if animals are there like overnight, it's because they're recovering from.
Yeah, I don't think she has
surgeries.
enough space to
Did,
kennel.
wasn't there a kennel in, Oak Ridge? What was that guy's name that?
I don't know if it was actually a kennel.
It
but
wasn't a
was
kennel, they
Just the
had,
dogs are barking all the time.
yeah, they
but
had,
They had like a truck
Burdens.
with all the.
Burdens.
they
Was
had
it
the burdens, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they had
uh,
like all kinds of different horses.
But they didn't have an actual
Sheep,
kennel there?
sled
I
dogs,
didn't think so, no.
they had sled dogs.
It's like, yeah, I've been there. Faith used to ride there. They had horses, yeah,
Yeah.
but they didn't, I don't think they kenneled any. Are they still there?
No,
No,
they went out west,
Yeah,
No, that was
Did
all
they keep
their
the
own
house?
animals.
right.
They sold the house.
What's
Okay.
that?
That was all their own.
Own animals, yeah.
Their own
Faith
stuff.
used to go there, yeah, and horses,
So,
yeah.
So we may not wanna allow boarding kennels anywhere in town, but it's a service that's needed, but it's,
It's a rough one to live next to.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know how people do it. I didn't have,
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
we used to occasionally take our dog to, what is
Katie
it?
Woods
Yeah.
or, yeah, I don't know how, they wear headphone, I mean, all day. I've seen, and I.
Not Katie Woods, not Katie
No.
Woods, but,
On Crooked Road?
on Day Mountain Road. Who was the fellow who, and his wife died, she was
Oh,
at,
Michelle
Michelle.
Crone.
no,
Abbott,
Charlie,
or, yeah,
Charlie.
yes, you're right,
They used to do it as a house, home
Yeah.
occupation, I think.
oh, really? Oh.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, they didn't really kennel, they just took them.
it was
for-
daycare. Well, they, no,
Yeah,
they
it
dogs
was
stayed
freaking
overnight.
daycare.
No, dogs stayed overnight there.
No, they stayed overnight, but they weren't necessarily like, when I think of a
There
kennel.
there was no
oh,
money
sorry,
exchange, Kevin.
I think of like a row of kennels and I mean, that almost seemed more like
Oh, that was really well
babysitting.
known. They had a website.
Yeah.
That's it.
Let's try to get through the bees.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yes, okay, so we're gonna move on. Where we have to figure out boat launching facility.
Yep.
Is that a marina?
No, it's
Sounds
just
like a ramp.
designed for launching and landing. Which may include an access ramp or docking area and parking spaces for vehicles
Is
and
that
trailers.
I was gonna say, is that
Somerville
Somerville?
Landing, or
Yeah.
something.
Cause anyone can go there, right, and launch their boat?
So is
Oh, not
that,
in Somerville.
Land-
Oh, not in some, you
No,
can't,
no.
oh,
you
okay,
have to be a resident?
a resident, oh, okay,
That's
resident.
It's a private.
And
Like, I could go there and do it, or do you have to have a mooring and all that? too?
you have to be a member,
You have to be
Oh,
a
you have to
member,
be a
and you have to
member.
live.
Oh, it's a
in the-
member.
You have to live in the
Okay.
community.
which you
Okay,
can be a member, by the way.
okay, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, I
Yeah.
think I need
Where,
to,
yeah, I know where you live.
we're home quarry.
So what do
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
of that one?
Okay.
We got one already, but if you do it, it's gonna be in the shoreline zone, so does that allow anywhere in the shoreline zone to have a?
So,
Yeah, because that's certainly not commercial. So,
I don't know if that's something you want
conditional,
everywhere and shoreline, but hey, I don't live here.
okay, I mean, the problem is there aren't too many places for people to get access to the water.
Oh, ledgy, and,
Um,
I mean,
all right, boat storage repair services already covered, brewery, distillery, winery, here we go.
Hey,
yeah.
Here we go.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
all the way across.
Village commercial,
CEO,
CEO, yeah. Must have tasting rights,
Right.
With sampling.
Yes.
with sampling, yeah,
Required.
yeah.
Do you
So
wanna
is there
allow
a
such a
reason why
thing?
You wouldn't want to allow it in the shoreline, I guess shoreline residential isn't quite the place for it, I guess.
Are you
Right,
talking like Sweet Peas out, is it that kind of
Could be
place,
that,
like
it could be
that kind
Atlantic Brewery,
yeah,
or Atlantic Brewery, yeah?
There was a couple that wanted to do one on Tracy Road.
Yes, there was, that's right.
Tracy Road isn't in the shoreline, isn't in.
No, I know, I'm just saying, just.
No,
that's
that's
a question, like-
That's
Village
right,
commercial.
Yeah.
so you do village commercial and then you're in Silverware again,
yeah.
but
I
that'll
mean, I
have to
don't-
be sorted,
I
we
would think they'd
can't,
need quite a bit of room,
well, then there won't be
But-
many of them, that's for
yeah.
sure.
Like, if we came in right now and
Mhm.
Joe and I wanted to do a brewery.
Yeah.
We could buy a building here
Mhm.
in town and call it, we just have to have the restaurant part associated with it, but we could still have a brewery,
Mhm.
right? If we came in for that, I think this is just making it.
Yeah,
clear
you
that
call
don't
it
necessarily have to be-
Restaurant and
It
brewery,
could just be a brewery,
Or-
not a.
you wouldn't have to have restaurant in the title.
Well, the state would probably have a role in.
Maybe,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm sure they will, yeah.
Yeah,
Classified.
building materials yard. That is storage area for materials used in building and construction such as roofing, fill material, wood equipment, vehicles, machinery, paints,
Does that make
pipes, or
sense?
electric components.
Buckland's, Hammond, well, Hammond's in.
Wouldn't that
but-
be contractor services?
Well, it's a separate,
You know, there's services 2, 1, 2, and 3, there's contractor, and
Yep.
electricians and plumbers, indoor,
So I think this would be one of those ones sort of like animal husbandry where we might wanna say, well, here's how we're currently dealing with it.
Mhm.
Is
Right.
this way better?
yeah,
Is it better to like be more specific or is it better to the way that we have it? And then I would, don't do both. You're gonna do one or the
yeah,
other.
yeah.
yes, all right,
it's
so we
just-
need to
I think
sort
it just
that.
takes a little- we just
Cause
have to
does
think
Browns
about
have
it.
anything
I would
anymore
flag
back
that.
there?
Cause
in
building
that closet?
materials to me yard would be,
Like
yeah,
Buckland's.
well, it'd be, yeah, well, cause he does
Buckland,
have
he does have
lumber.
those sheds, but yeah.
Well, fill material, you've got
There's
all
that
these,
place out on Oak Hill Road.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
used to be catered.
It's,
Yeah.
for bulk materials.
Oh, that's no longer,
Not-
Ben must have a few pits. Maybe
No,
not,
it's
maybe there's no
actually-
harbor.
someone bought it and was gonna get a garage with an apartment above and now
Oh.
it's building another house.
Hmm.
It's not
wow.
being
Oh.
used.
Hmm.
Like, it's all been rated and leveling it,
Nice,
Hmm.
Yeah,
it's residential use now.
oh, that's good.
so just quickly keep going for a moment. Campground is already in there, campsite individual private. I was kind of puzzled by the campground individual campsite. That's, you can have 4 sites in a campsite definition.
Right now, I think you could have,
No, but in the
Cranberry
definition
Island
that you've got
town house,
proposed.
No,
No.
And
I was
why?
gonna say, doesn't
Good
Gary
campground.
Allen have like,
It's-
he
I'm
lets- yeah,
sorry.
he lets people
It's
camp on his.
campsite. I didn't
Not that
quite,
he's a
I know we
model
have
citizen or anything.
the
but
ordinance that
just
just
saying.
passed,
Just saying,
allowing somebody to have a single campsite in their yard.
it talks about, you can have a single one now, or
campsite,
yeah,
But this one is a campsite for up to 10 people, which is the other one is too, but it's allowing up to 4 campsites.
Yeah, so it's
I don't know why.
a
we want
campsite
that.
not associated with a campground
that's
is
what to me
limited,
would be
is
commercial.
limited to
Yeah.
one such
Isn't it?
site within the shoreline zone or 4 or fewer such sites outside the shoreline zone. So if I wanted to
put
allow,
4 sites on
put
my
4 sites on my
land, you
property,
could.
then I could do that if it's outside the shoreline zone
Wow.
in this
But
definition.
why would we do that?
You don't have to.
Yeah, I would,
I'm trying to
I
think, do
think-
I know anyone that does?
No zone allows campgrounds anyway, so obviously people don't like campgrounds or want them. Individual private campsites, I've always had just like the inclination that, especially under the definition that you gotta meet the zone, like if I have a principal structure on my property, in order to have an individual campsite, especially in the shoreline, wholly or partially in the shoreline zone, I gotta meet the dimensional requirements times too.
right,
Mhm.
but we just passed that amendment to the LUZO that allows
Individual.
people individual, but that's like, you know, one path.
I'm not thinking
for-
of, yeah, I'm not thinking
Not four.
foresight, I'm thinking.
But that's, all I'm
just-
saying is a
Yeah.
campsite in this
In that
definition that
says
is
4.
proposed as 4. So I think we wanna
Yeah.
pay attention to that. We're finished.
4, yeah.
We're finished.
That one we might.
And we'll start with cemetery next time.
Oh, so there you go, all right.
Will that be around Halloween?
Yeah, no. Well, that's another question. So next time. Are we gonna be in a position to look at the solar stuff again next time, or?
I think so, yeah, I would add that to the agenda, and then, I can't remember what's next on the list, but we'll.
Well, this could take a lot of time.
Yep.
If we're gonna, I think we need to decide, are we actually gonna try to push this out for the next town meeting, because
Yeah.
we got a lot to do here.
I think we ought to hold that till the end of the game time.
What's that?
On this.
For this one,
To me, this is like, you gotta get it right, otherwise. it's-
Yeah, it could take all of the time between now and February, March, when it has to be
Yeah.
right?
published and all that stuff.
If we have other things that, don't we need to make some changes to the mobile home?
Yep.
Law, if we could, some of that stuff that's smaller,
That's what I was gonna say.
make us feel accomplished.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be like, if you wanna reserve a time in each agenda, kind of get through,
A little more of this,
an alphabet section, We're
yeah,
gonna do C and D this time or whatever,
yeah,
and then we'll integrate in things that we're trying to check off the list. So we're gonna, like with things like the solar ordinance, it's really good to go through it, and then you'll have another draft to go through, so it's like kind of a back and forth situation.
and are we gonna see if somebody from,
I can
Time
check
to
with that. I told
Thrive
them
can join
already, I
us?
was gonna check it with them tomorrow.
okay, and we will have the structure of the committee, or the purpose of the committee, we'll look at that again. I think one of the things we're gonna really need to do is grapple with minute taking for this.
Don't we have to? I don't think we have to vote to adjourn, because aren't we just a
No, we're not.
committee, not a board?
We are voting with our feet.
Right, I was
We are
gonna say,
adjourned.
I think